Hey guys! Tonight, we're settling in for something soft, warm, and wonderfully unurgent. So go ahead, dim the lights, fluff the pillow you've hopefully been emotionally dependent on since childhood, and let your brain slide gently into that semi-floating state where history feels less like homework and more like a bedtime story told by someone who's had way too much herbal tea. Because tonight, we're wandering through the ancient world. But not the dramatic side. Not the big battles, not the heroic epics, not the Julius Caesar got stabbed 23 times and honestly, he probably deserved at least half of them part. No. We're looking at how people slept. A topic that somehow manages to be universal, mildly weird, and deeply revealing of human nature, all without raising your heart rate above about to nap. Perfect for bedtime. So take a breath, in and out, and let's wander slowly, very slowly, through the earliest sleeping habits of ancient civilizations. A global tour of bedtime routines from people who lived thousands of years ago, but still managed to be just as dramatic, tired, and emotionally fragile as we are today. Let's begin where so much early complex civilization began, in the warm nights along the Nile River. So, Egypt. A civilization famous for pyramids, mummies, and pharaohs who had the self-esteem of reality TV stars. But also, a place where sleep wasn't just sleep. It was a daily reunion with the gods, and occasionally an excuse to buy furniture that was significantly less comfortable than whatever you're lying on right now. To start, Egyptians slept on beds that were, well, let's call them minimalist. Imagine a slightly curved wooden plank raised off the ground. Not for comfort, of course, but because Egypt is full of things you do not want crawling into your sheets at night. Scorpions, snakes, beetles, basically a living nightmare cast from a nature documentary narrated by someone having a nervous breakdown. So instead of getting softer, their beds got higher, smoother, and sometimes decorated with lion legs or bull legs, because ancient elites couldn't go 10 minutes without reminding everyone they were powerful. And the pillows? Not fluffy, not soft, not even mildly supportive. No. Egyptians used headrests, curved stone or wood stands that elevated the skull just enough to keep the spirits aligned, but probably guaranteed a stiff neck by morning. Imagine going to a hotel and finding a solid stone U-shaped pillow. You'd check out immediately. But for Egyptians, this thing was sacred. It kept your brain safe. It protected your dreams. And, very practically, it kept hot air circulating around your head because Egypt is basically a sunburn waiting to happen. And speaking of dreams, Egyptians took dreams seriously. As in messages from gods, ancestors, demons, and that one weird uncle who never gives good advice. There were whole dream manuals listing interpretations like, dreaming of eating crocodile meat? Congratulations, you're about to win a court case. Dreaming of drinking warm beer? Sorry, bad omen. Probably illness, also probably just the reaction to warm beer. Priests would sleep in temples in a ritual called incubation, which sounds medical but was basically a spiritual sleepover where you laid on a sacred mat and hoped the god Serapis would visit your dreams instead of, I don't know, a mosquito the size of a golf ball. And of course, pharaohs had their own elaborate rituals. High-status people would perfume their bed sheets, apply oils, sleep with charms, and generally treat bedtime like a red carpet event, which is deeply relatable. We all have that one pillow or blanket that feels vaguely sacred. Let's drift over now from Egypt to an even older cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia, modern Iraq, roughly. Home of the earliest cities, earliest kings, and earliest people who probably went to bed every night thinking, I cannot believe we invented taxes. Sleep here was practical. Not much fuss. Not many pillows carved from volcanic rock. Mostly simple woven mats or reed beds placed as far away possible from the city streets, which were full of animals, noise, and the ancient equivalent of that one neighbor who argues loudly at 2 a.m. Sleep here was practical. Not much fuss. Not many pillows carved from volcanic rock. Mostly simple woven mats or reed beds placed as far away possible from the city streets, which were full of animals, noise, and the ancient equivalent of that one neighbor who argues loudly at 2 a.m. Mesopotamians slept indoors when they could, but summers were brutally hot. So for large chunks of the year, families would drag their mats up onto the flat roofs of their homes and sleep under the stars. A delightful, breezy experience, except when the dust storms started, or when your neighbor also came up to sleep along with his goats, and everyone pretended this was normal. Like Egyptians, Mesopotamians also believed dreams came from the gods. But their gods were, let's just say, less emotionally stable. If Egyptian gods were like structured, ritual-heavy professors, Mesopotamian gods were like chaotic co-workers who appear in your dreams unannounced and ask for favors at 3 a.m. Kings had dream interpreters who followed them around like spiritual customer service reps. They analyzed everything. Dream about a flood? Trouble. Dream about eating figs? Prosperity. Dream about the goddess Ishtar showing up uninvited? Good luck, buddy. And of course, insomnia was absolutely recognized. They blamed restless spirits, poor omens, or the person sleeping next to you snoring loudly, which, to be fair, is a universally valid explanation. But even with all this superstition, Mesopotamian sleep culture was grounded. People napped during the day. They slept in shifts. They slept in large family units. Basically, everything modern sleep influencers on YouTube would faint over. Let's float slowly eastward now to a place where sleep wasn't just physical. It was cosmic, harmonized, and occasionally ruined by firecrackers and ancestor ghosts. So, ancient China. A civilization that documented everything, philosophized about everything, and somehow managed to turn sleeping into a deeply thoughtful experience. Beds here ranged from simple mats to heated stone platforms called kang beds, which were basically ancient heated floor systems. If you've ever tried a heated blanket in winter and thought it was life-changing, imagine lying on a whole bed warmed by a slow-burning fire underneath. Peak comfort, though also peak risk of being mildly roasted if you misjudged the fire level. Chinese philosophy shaped sleep patterns for millennia. Confucianism, always the strict parent of philosophy, insisted on order and routine. You slept early, you woke early, you didn't make noise. You definitely didn't sleep late, unless you wanted neighbors whispering about your moral character. Meanwhile, Taoism was like the chill ant, telling you to relax and let your qi flow. Sleep was seen as part of the cosmic cycle. Not too little, not too much, and preferably without spiritual disturbances. Speaking of spirits, Chinese folklore is full of nighttime anxieties. Ancestral ghosts, wandering souls, mischievous spirits who sat on your chest. Not quite demons, but definitely not winning any personality awards. Oh, and the belief that sleeping north-south aligned you with the Earth's magnetic forces, that stuck around. So did the obsession with not sleeping with your feet toward the door, which was considered the death position.
because that's how corpses are removed. You might think that's creepy, but honestly, compared to modern feng shui advice like don't put a mirror facing your bed or your soul will get confused, ancient China was being relatively practical. Beds were kept simple. Sleepwear was loose, and dreams were messages from both the living world and the dead, basically like checking 2 inboxes at once. Let's drift gently now, southward, into a place where sleep was a spiritual journey and mattresses were optional. Ancient India had entire philosophical texts dedicated to sleep. And I mean hundreds of pages of analysis. If you've ever read a modern wellness article about aligning your sleep cycles with cosmic rhythms, just know India did it first and they did it better. The Vedas and Upanishads describe sleep in 3 states: waking, dreaming, deep sleep, a state that was considered close to touching the absolute divine. Western civilizations were like, dream means good harvest. India was like, dream is one mode of consciousness by which the Atman perceives the subtle universe. Just slightly more advanced. As for actual sleeping arrangements, most people slept on woven charpoys, those iconic rope beds that look fragile, but somehow support entire families and their extended relatives. Light, airy, and probably more ergonomic than half the mattresses on sale today. People slept outdoors often, especially in warm seasons. They napped freely, and they invented the concept of yoga nidra, yogic sleep, which is basically meditation while almost asleep, but not actually asleep, but also sort of asleep. If that sounds confusing, don't worry. Ancient India loved deeply introspective ambiguity. Dream interpretation was also a full-time job. Texts like the Swapna Sastra categorized dream symbols with more detail than modern dating apps categorize personality types. Dream of flying? Spiritual elevation. Dream of drinking milk? Prosperity. Dream of your enemy smiling at you? Definitely bad, possibly poison, probably both. Let's drift across the ocean now, far west, to a land of warriors, philosophers, and people who absolutely did not sleep enough. Greeks, the people who invented Western philosophy, democracy, and the difficult student who always asks one extra question at the end of class. Sleep for them was necessary, but also kind of inconvenient. Nighttime was a break between parties, symposia, and political arguments, all lovingly preserved in texts written by men who clearly had terrible circadian rhythms. Greeks believed sleep was the brother of death, literally. Hypnos, sleep, and thanatos, death, were twins, which is probably why Greek beds were famously uncomfortable and made of wood with thin mats. They seemed determined not to get too cozy. Normal people slept early and woke early, but elites? They would go out drinking until dawn, then write philosophical treatises in the morning, then complain about how tired they were. History's first burnout cycle. Dream interpretation was huge, because of course it was. Artemidorus of Daldis wrote a 5-volume dream manual so detailed it makes Freud look like he was taking notes in crayon. Temples of Asclepius offered dream healing. People would sleep in sacred halls, hoping the god would appear and cure them through symbolic visions. Which sounds peaceful until you realize these temples were often full of snakes, sacred snakes, which were allowed to slither around freely. Imagine trying to fall asleep while fully aware that a sacred reptile might crawl across your face in the middle of the night. Truly relaxing. Let's float gently now toward a civilization that took all of Greece's ideas and then added their own flair, drama, and, questionable decisions. Romans slept less than almost any ancient civilization. The city was loud, constantly. Carts rumbling, vendors yelling, neighbors arguing, dogs barking, teens probably playing whatever the ancient version of loud music was. Poor Romans often slept in single-room apartments with their entire family, which sounds cozy. If by cozy you mean exactly zero privacy and everyone knows when you snore. Elite Romans, on the other hand, slept in separate bedrooms called cubicula, decorated with frescoes, incense burners, and sometimes personal servants who stood around waiting for you to wake up so they could hand you fruit or slippers. Imagine having an employee whose job description was essentially be present at dawn. Romans slept in two phases like much of the ancient world. First sleep, middle of the night wandering. Second sleep. During the middle interval, people prayed, read, visited neighbors, or ate snacks. Basically the original 3 a.m. I can't sleep, so I'm in the kitchen eating cheese out of the fridge moment. Dreams were messages from gods or ancestors, unless they were bad dreams, which were caused by indigestion, unbalanced humors, or the fact that Roman food was frequently terrible. Let's float farther, all the way across the world, to civilizations who built pyramids of their own and treated sleep as a portal to the divine. In Mesoamerican cultures, like the Maya and Aztec, sleep wasn't passive, it was active, a journey your soul took while your body stayed behind, hopefully not snoring. Mayan nobles slept on raised wooden beds with fabrics and jaguar skins. Commoners slept on simple mats, often with the entire family piled together like a warm, slightly chaotic bundle. Dreams were direct messages from the spirit world. Every vision, every symbol, every weird scenario where your cousin turned into a glowing bird, all of it meant something. Priests interpreted dreams as warnings, prophecies, or spiritual assignments. The Aztecs believed the soul could leave the body during sleep, which is beautiful, until you remember they also thought sleeping with your mouth open was an invitation for spirits to enter. So if you're a mouth sleeper, good luck in the ancient world. And with that, the ancient world has tucked us into bed, just for tonight. We've drifted through Egypt's stone pillows, Mesopotamia's rooftop naps, China's qi-aligned sleeping positions, India's philosophical dream states, Greece's temple sleepovers, Rome's insomniac chaos, and Mesoamerica's cosmic dream journey.
So, ancient China, a civilization that documented everything, philosophized about everything, and somehow managed to turn sleeping into a deeply thoughtful experience. Beds here ranged from simple mats to heated stone platforms called
Hey again, everyone. If you're still awake, which, let's be honest, is statistically unlikely, welcome back. And if you drifted off somewhere in the middle of that Egyptian stone pillow moment, no worries. That's literally the point. Tonight, we keep floating through the ancient world, but now we're drifting into the details, the way ordinary people slept, the way elites slept, and what happened when sleep became political, spiritual, or just deeply inconvenient. So, take another slow breath, let your eyes soften, and let's glide quietly into the next stretch of our global tour. Japan has one of the most tranquil sleep cultures in history. Minimalist, orderly, respectful. Exactly the opposite of Roman sleep culture, which was basically chaos with a pillow. In ancient Japan, people slept on tatami mats and futon bedding, Not the fluffy modern ones, but thin, breathable fabric layers you rolled out at night and stored away during the day. Which means ancient Japanese bedrooms didn't really exist. You just rearranged the room depending on the time. A concept that terrifies modern people with their $1,000 mattress subscriptions. And the sleeping position? On the back or side, neatly, quietly, because good posture wasn't just polite, it was spiritual. A straight spine meant straight energy flow. A disordered sleeping shape meant disordered spirit. Which honestly checks out. Most of us have woken up from a terrible position and felt spiritually broken. Japanese folklore, though, added a little spice to bedtime. There were yokai, spirits, who loved bothering sleepers. The kaneshibari experience, what we now call sleep paralysis, was blamed on mischievous spirits sitting on your chest. Which means that for centuries, people woke up gasping for breath and said, "Ah, yes, demons." Not, "I need better sleep hygiene." Of course, nobles had luxurious bedding, embroidered silks, layered quilts, and enough aesthetic harmony to make modern interior designers cry with joy. But even they slept simply compared to Egyptian pharaohs or Persian kings. Japan valued simplicity. And it shows. Let's drift westward now, into a world of incense, sensuality, and nighttime rituals that were half spiritual practice and half beauty routine. Persians, especially during the Achaemenid and Sasanian periods, did not approach bedtime casually. They approached it like a luxury event sponsored by the gods. Persian elites slept on raised beds with carved legs, thick cushions, sheets dyed with expensive plant pigments, and blankets embroidered with gold thread. The kind of bedding that screams, "I am rich, beautiful, and vaguely allergic to simplicity." Before sleep, nobles would bathe in rose water or apply perfumed oils. Think of it as ancient skincare, but without the influencer discount codes. Persian bedrooms glowed softly with oil lamps, and incense burned, sandalwood, myrrh, frankincense, because apparently the goal was to fall asleep smelling like a walking religious ceremony. And of course, dreams were taken seriously. Zoroastrianism taught that dreams could be omens, messages, or moral tests. A good dream meant ethical harmony. A bad dream? Time to evaluate your life choices. Common people slept much more simply. Reed mats, wool blankets, shared family sleeping areas, napping when needed. Normal, human, non-palace behavior. But the elite sleep culture left its mark. Perfumed sheets became a symbol of refinement, and nighttime rituals became part of daily life, even for those who couldn't afford gold-embroidered anything. Let's keep drifting west now, over to the Mediterranean, to a civilization made of stone, poetry, and a surprising amount of insomnia. The Phoenicians, those ancient sailors and traders who brought alphabets to the world, had a sleep culture shaped by practicality. Homes were small, beds were basic. People slept early because maritime life demanded dawn labor. Luxuries? Minimal. Unless you were wealthy, in which case you got nicer blankets and maybe some imported bedding materials. But Phoenicia wasn't big on palace extravagance like Egypt or Persia. Phoenicia valued simplicity. And it shows. Let's move a bit farther south now, to one of the most advanced ancient cultures, complete with mathematics, astronomy, and people who slept in floating houses. Nubians, south of Egypt, shared many Egyptian traditions, but they developed their own distinct sleep culture. Many Nubians slept on raised platforms or woven mats. Summer nights were often spent outdoors. And like many African cultures, communal sleeping was normal. Not a sign of poverty, but a sign of family life and heat management. Dreams were spiritually important. Nubian tombs show scenes of rest, sleep, and dream visions. Kings and queens recorded dream omens as part of governance. Nighttime was when ancestors communicated, softly, symbolically, never too dramatically. People used herbs and aromatic plants to relax. Calendula, myrrh, and desert resins were burned before bed. Call it ancient aromatherapy. Let's drift across the sea now, to a civilization made of stone, poetry, and a surprising amount of insomnia,
Ancient Israelite sleep culture was shaped heavily by religion, as you'd expect. Most people slept on simple mats or short wooden beds. Households shared sleeping areas, and nights were often broken by prayer, watch duties, or livestock noises. The Bible paints a very specific picture of sleep. Night was a time of vulnerability. Dreams were messages from God. Prophets received visions mid-sleep. Kings lost sleep worrying about wars and taxes. Incredibly relatable, minus the wars. There's a recurring theme of night watches, people staying awake in shifts to guard camps, homes, and herds. Segmented sleep was normal. And then there's the Book of Psalms, full of lines about lying awake, praying through the night, or finding comfort in sleep as divine protection. It's basically one long playlist of slow, melancholy nighttime vibes. Let's drift again, farther west now, toward a place where sleep was communal, musical, and much more rhythmic. Celtic sleep culture was shaped by weather. Cold, damp, unpredictable. So indoors meant warmth, fire, and everyone huddled together for body heat. Beds ranged from straw piles to wooden frames covered in wool and furs. Kids, parents, elders, guests, everyone slept in the same hall. Privacy didn't exist, and neither did quiet, snoring alternatives. Dreams were omens, always omens. A chieftain dreaming of battle? Time to consult the druids. A woman dreaming of geese? Marriage omen. A farmer dreaming of rain? Could be good, could be bad, could be random. Celtic dream interpretation was more vibey than scientific. Nighttime storytelling was common. People fell asleep to myths, legends, heroic tales. It was basically ancient Netflix autoplaying every night. Let's drift a bit northwest, into a land of sagas, storms, and extremely cold bedrooms. Norse sleeping arrangements were practical. You slept in a longhouse, one big communal hall where people, livestock, and the occasional warrior all shared space. Privacy? None. Warmth? Barely enough. Snoring? Guaranteed. Beds were wooden frames stuffed with straw, wool, and fur. If you were wealthy, you got fancier blankets. If you were a thrall, enslaved person, you got sleeping space near the door, a drafty, miserable area that doubled as the coldest part of the building. Norse dreams were messages from the gods. Odin, in particular, loved visiting people in dreams, usually to give cryptic warnings no one understood fully until it was too late. There's also a lot of sleep imagery in sagas. Heroes falling into deep, prophetic sleeps, ghosts appearing at night, ominous visions during winter storms. Basically, Norse bedtime stories were the kind of thing that makes children refuse to sleep. Let's drift south now, into the warmth of the Mediterranean, to a culture that perfected the siesta. North African tribal cultures developed sleep habits adapted to desert heat. People rested during the midday sun, because trying to work at noon was a great way to faint dramatically into a sand dune. Nights were for sleep, deep sleep. Cool air, open courtyards, mats spread across the ground. Berber families slept communally. Nomadic groups slept in tents with patterned rugs, wool blankets, and cushions that doubled as daytime seating. Dreams were often seen as ancestral messages or warnings about travel. If you dreamed of water, it could symbolize guidance. If you dreamed of storms, it was a sign to delay journeys. Let's drift across the Atlantic now, to a sleeping habits of one of the most unique civilizations in the ancient world. In the Andes, sleep was shaped by altitude. Nights were freezing, homes were stone, and survival meant warmth above all else. People slept with llama wool blankets, alpaca wool clothing, wool everything. Basically, if it wasn't wool, it didn't exist. Families slept together in single-room houses.
Fires burned low through the night, and outside the mountains loomed dark and silent, a landscape that shaped dreams and folklore. The Inca believed dreams carried meaning. A dream of falling meant danger. A dream of fire meant conflict. A dream of llamas? Who knows? Probably taxes. Let's drift north now, to deserts, pueblos, forests, and the sleep cultures of indigenous North America. Because the continent held diverse cultures, sleep varied widely. Plains peoples often slept in teepees, which were incredibly well designed, warm in winter, cool in summer, ventilated naturally. People slept on furs or woven mats. Nights were filled with star watching, stories, and rhythmic drumming. Pueblo peoples slept in adobe homes with thick walls that held daytime heat and released it slowly at night. Northwest coast peoples slept in large plank houses decorated with clan symbols, and families slept together, surrounded by carvings and painted totems that watched over them. Dreams held deep significance. Many tribes saw dreams as meetings with spirit guides. A dream could shape someone's identity, purpose, or adult name. Night was respected, a time for quiet, reflection, and connection with the unseen. Let's drift back across the ocean now to a place where sleep was dramatically influenced by weather, ritual, and royal expectations. Polynesian peoples slept in raised houses built to harness wind. Ocean breezes drifted through woven walls. People slept on mats, sometimes with simple wooden headrests. Communal sleeping was normal. Big families, shared spaces, lots of warmth. Dreaming was important. It connected people to ancestors. Shamans interpreted symbols. A dream could predict a voyage, a storm, or a birth. Some Polynesian cultures believed the soul traveled during sleep, to islands beyond the physical world, guided by ancestors, returning at dawn. A beautiful concept, unless the soul didn't return, in which case nightmares were taken very seriously.
Hey guys, welcome back. If you're already half asleep from parts 1 and 2, perfect. That's exactly what we're aiming for. So let's gently slide, very softly, like someone trying not to wake a cat, into the world of ancient Mesopotamia. You know, the land between the rivers, the birthplace of civilization, the region where humans first said, what if we organized ourselves a little? And absolutely nobody realized they were accidentally inventing millennia of bureaucratic headaches. Tonight, though, we're not talking about taxes or grain tablets. We're talking about how they slept. And trust me, Mesopotamian sleep culture is, well, about as chaotic as you'd expect from a civilization that thought half its problems were caused by ghosts climbing onto people's chests at 3 a.m. Because honestly, same. Unlike Egyptian elites sleeping on elevated wooden frames and Greek philosophers napping anywhere they pleased, Mesopotamians approached the idea of a bedroom with the enthusiasm of someone opening a filing cabinet. It existed, it worked, but it wasn't glamorous. Most lower-class homes were made of mud brick with maybe 2 or 3 rooms total. Rooms weren't really assigned purposes, unless purpose included keeping out the heat, keeping out the cold, or keeping out whatever demon was trending that century. So families often slept together, literally in the same room, often on reed mats, sometimes on the bare floor. Cozy? Yes. Private? Absolutely not. But remember, this is a world where half the roof could collapse annually due to rainfall. So your biggest nightly concern was not, I need personal time, but rather, I hope an angry rain god doesn't drop my ceiling on my face tonight. And surprisingly, they slept outside a lot, especially on the roofs. The flat rooftop was like the ancient Mesopotamian version of a rooftop cafe, except instead of overpriced iced coffee, you got a chance to not melt to death indoors. People dragged mats and blankets up ladders, stretched out under the stars, and hoped the night breeze would do its thing. Some families even slept up there year-round.
Imagine you're lying on your roof in 2000 BCE, staring at the Milky Way, and someone on the next house coughs loudly because they inhaled a mosquito. Very atmospheric, very communal, very Mesopotamia. Now, wealthy households did have actual beds, but not the luxurious I sleep like Cleopatra type situations you might picture. Think more wooden frames, some carvings if you were fancy, straps or planks as a base, and mattresses stuffed with wool or straw. Not soft, not cloud-like, just less miserable than the floor. Elite beds did sometimes have headboards though, and a few even had bronze decorations shaped like animals, because nothing says sleep well than being watched over by a giant metal bullhead at the foot of your bed. People also used pillows, but don't imagine plush, fluffy things. Think firm. Think densely packed. Think something that feels suspiciously close to a lightly padded brick. Good for posture, questionable for dreams. If you think modern people have nighttime anxieties, Mesopotamians were operating on hard mode. They believed sleep was a vulnerable state, like leaving your front door open with a "Ghosts Welcome" sign. Dreams weren't just dreams, they were communications, warnings, prophecies, occasionally cosmic pranks. So naturally, they wrote entire books, literal clay tablets about dream interpretation. And let me tell you, the dream omens ranged from poetic to, did the scribe just give up halfway? For example, dreaming of eating too much bread threatens bad, because gluten overload has always been a threat. Dreaming of drowning forbids that a deity is annoyed with you. Honestly fair. Dreaming of your dead uncle handing you a goat will involve you in your many. Extremely vague, but not technically wrong. But my favorite, dreaming that a god kisses you forbids that a god will act kindly toward you. Not sure how many people woke up from that one feeling peaceful, but at least the gods weren't shy. Mesopotamians didn't just go to bed, they prepared. Remember, ghosts, demons, wandering spirits, and the occasional malicious ancestor were all considered nighttime hazards. So people turned to incantations, charms, and protective rituals before sleep. You might whisper a prayer to your personal deity, or trace a protective symbol in the air, or place a small figurine, usually a protective god, near your pillow. Sometimes the figurines were placed under the bed too, which makes sense if you've ever believed that something lurks under beds. What's especially soothing is the idea that Mesopotamians believed sickness could be caused by a ghost literally sitting on your chest while you slept. You wake up lightheaded, sweaty, and tired. Ghost. Every time. No exceptions. Honestly, that explains a lot about ancient medical records. One common charm involved burning a mixture of herbs before nightfall to clear out the bad energy. So, basically the original aromatherapy, except instead of relaxing lavender, it was, please keep the night demons away.
Dreams weren't just taken seriously. They could influence politics. Kings kept dreams specialists on staff, professional interpreters who read dreams like full-time astrologers, except with more clay tablets involved. These specialists had entire manuals with if X, then Y rules. Very systematic, very ancient, very unhelpful for anyone who dreamed outside the standard Mesopotamian content categories. Some kings even wrote about their dreams in official inscriptions, because nothing says stable leadership like announcing that you invaded a neighboring city because you dreamed of a cow staring at you with cosmic intensity. But honestly, that's still better than half the reasons rulers make decisions today. Mesopotamian cities were dense. The kind of dense where you could probably reach out your window and touch your neighbor's clay wall. And city noise didn't disappear at sunset. Dogs barked, donkeys brayed, people shouted. Ceremonial processions happened at weird hours. Priests did chanting things. Someone's roof ladder squeaked. Someone else dropped a pot. Every night was basically a chaotic soundscape of the Bronze Age is loud. So yes, insomnia existed, and surprisingly, the tablets acknowledge this. A few surviving texts mention spells or prayers specifically intended to help someone fall asleep. One even describes a priest performing a ritual to quiet the heart of a restless man, which is honestly the ancient world's version of melatonin gummies. Another text advises lying still, controlling your breathing, and listening to soft chanting. So basically, Mesopotamian ASMR. The weather in Mesopotamia was no joke. Summers were scorching, winters were chilly, and homes had, well, zero insulation. So sleep adjustments were constant. In summer, people slept on roofs. They used reeds or palm leaf mats instead of heavy bedding. They sometimes slept multiple short periods to avoid the worst nighttime heat, a bit like modern segmented sleep patterns. In winter, everyone moved indoors. Thick blankets made of wool were prized. People slept closer together for warmth. Fire pits kept the house comfortable, but smoke could linger if ventilation was bad, which it usually was. So essentially, every season came with its own mixed bag of sleep issues, just like today. We don't have exact hour-by-hour records. Mesopotamians weren't using Fitbits, but based on texts, seasonal rhythms, and general ancient patterns, scholars estimate roughly 6 to 9 hours at night, plus occasional daytime naps. Laborers working long days likely slept less. Priests performing nighttime rituals slept at staggered times. And of course, royal sleep schedules were probably uniquely chaotic. One king, for instance, recorded waking up repeatedly at night because he feared divine punishment, the ancient equivalent of waking up at 3:47 a.m. remembering something embarrassing you did in high school. When we imagine kings, we imagine luxury. But royalty in Mesopotamia didn't always get better sleep. Consider the responsibilities: managing floods, avoiding plagues, keeping neighboring city-states from invading, interpreting dreams in a way that wouldn't doom the entire kingdom, appeasing gods who were notoriously temperamental. Rulers spent many nights sleeping restlessly, surrounded by scribes, guards, and priests. Their beds might have been more ornate, but the sleep quality? Debatable. Some texts even show kings performing purification rituals before bed, especially if they'd had a bad dream the previous night. Imagine being so stressed you turned bedtime into a multi-step religious ceremony. Also, royal palaces were bustling 24/7. Servants, guards, animals, political guests. It was less peaceful private chamber and more sleeping in the middle of a very organized chaos. Mesopotamian gods slept too, at least in myths. Sometimes for dramatic effect, sometimes because the writers needed a plot device. One famous myth tells of a god who slept so deeply that the world fell into disorder because he basically forgot to handle his responsibilities, which is the most relatable thing any deity has ever done. In another story, humanity starts making too much noise, mostly cities and farming, so the gods complain they can't sleep, which again proves that even divine beings have neighbors who don't respect quiet hours. But the big theme? The gods used dreams as a communication method, so sleep wasn't just rest, it was a hotline. Nighttime was a sacred window where humans and gods exchanged messages, usually cryptic, occasionally threatening, sometimes helpful if you squinted hard enough. Did Mesopotamians have pajamas? Sort of. No fluffy sets, no matching cotton shorts, but people often slept in lighter tunics, basically soft linen garments, or even unclothed during hot seasons. But blankets were a big deal. Woven wool blankets could be passed down as family property. They were valuable and needed for winter nights. People stored them carefully and repaired them regularly. In a world of heat, dust, and unpredictable weather, a good blanket was like having a personal treasure. Kids slept with their parents or siblings. Beds, if they existed, were shared. Sleeping arrangements were informal and changed depending on weather, family size, and available space. Clay tablets mention soothing children with gentle songs, so ancient lullabies were definitely a thing. Parents used repetition and soft chanting to help their kids fall asleep, much like modern bedtime routines, except with more references to protective spirits. We also know that kids sometimes wore amulets at night, little beads or charms meant to keep nightmares away, like the original dream catcher,
but clay. Night wasn't just for rest. Some jobs operated after dark. Priests performed astronomical observations. Guards patrolled city gates. Bakers woke up extremely early to prepare bread. Scribes sometimes recorded omens before sunrise. Caravan leaders left at dawn to avoid heat. So while most people slept at night, the city never fully shut down. Mesopotamia was the original city that doesn't quite sleep, but does get pretty drowsy around 2 a.m. Yes, they existed. Yes, they were amazing. Imagine someone desperately carving their 3 a.m. nightmare into a clay tablet before it dried. The handwriting probably looked panicked. The message probably said something like, "I dreamed of a fish with 2 heads, please advise." Historians treasure these because they reveal how deeply dreams shaped daily life. People recorded them, interpreted them, told them to priests, and sometimes used them to make decisions. Honestly, Mesopotamians were the original dream analysis enthusiasts. Let's just imagine it for a moment. The streets dim, oil lamps flicker behind clay windows, the town quiets into a soft hum. On rooftops, people settle onto their mats, waiting for the desert breeze. Dogs bark somewhere in the distance. A priest chants softly from a temple quarter. The stars glow brighter than anything in the modern world. Families curl together under wool blankets. Some whisper prayers, some whisper dreams. Some just stare up at the open sky and hope the gods don't send anything weird tonight. It's peaceful, chaotic, spiritual, practical, and deeply human, just like sleep has always been.
Hey everyone, welcome back. If your eyes are heavy, perfect. If your pillow is calling you, even better. We're going to keep this slow, warm, and dreamlike as we drift into another ancient world, one that historians still can't fully figure out, and honestly, that's part of its charm. Tonight, we're gliding into the Indus Valley civilization, a place of smooth-baked bricks, quiet city planning, spotless streets, and people who somehow managed to invent urban sanitation before half the world figured out what a toilet was. And the best part? Their sleep culture is just as tidy and just as mysterious. Let's settle in. The first thing you need to know about the Indus Valley is that everything they did looked intentional. Their cities were so methodical, so organized, that it almost feels like walking into a place where everyone followed the same interior design Pinterest board. Straight streets, standardized brick sizes, drainage systems that would make a modern plumber cry with respect, and houses arranged in ways that suggest people actually thought about airflow, privacy, and, yes, sleep comfort. It's almost unsettling how normal they seemed. Unlike the loud, busy chaos of Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley cities, like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, give off a "we're just doing our thing" vibe. And that calmness absolutely spilled into their sleep habits. Most houses followed a predictable layout. A small entry, a central courtyard, rooms arranged around it, a bathroom, a designated washing area, and surprisingly sturdy walls, because sleeping next to thin mud brick isn't ideal when your neighbor snores. The courtyards acted like the heart of the home, letting in wind, keeping things cool, and giving families a peaceful place to settle down in the evenings. Rooms around these courtyards were multi-purpose. Just like Mesopotamia, they weren't labeled bedroom, but many were clearly used for sleeping. Some had raised platforms built into the floor, possibly early bed frames. Some had niches in the walls where lamps could sit. Some had storage for bedding.
all very reasonable, very organized, very Indus Valley. You get the sense that these people went to bed and woke up without unnecessary drama. Imagine that. We don't have many physical bed frames from the region. They didn't survive the 4,000-year timeline, but we do have clues. Terracotta models of furniture, depictions of raised platforms, household floor patterns that show where beds probably stood, and comparisons with later cultures in the region. Their bedding likely included reed mats, woven cotton cloths, stuffed cushions, possibly wooden cots for wealthier homes. Cotton was abundant in the region, so they probably used it for blankets, sheets, and wraps. Imagine soft cotton cloth in a warm climate. Pretty ideal for drifting off. They also had mosquito nets, or at least cloth hangings that functioned like mosquito nets. Because yes, even in 2500 BC, people understood the assignment. Keep insects out of your face. And honestly, respect. Just like Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley people loved sleeping on rooftops. Flat roofs, cool winds, soft night air, stars brighter than anything in the modern world. Except unlike Mesopotamia, where rooftop sleeping sometimes felt like an improvisation, the Indus Valley seemed to plan for it. Roofs were built strong, accessible, private enough for families, and safe enough for kids. Some houses even had staircases positioned in ways that made rooftop sleeping convenient. You get the sense that rooftop nights were part of the rhythm of life. Picture it. A warm evening. The courtyard lanterns flicker in, the sound of wind moving over baked brick, families carrying bedding to the roof, children settling down in neat little rows, adults chatting softly, dogs wandering between rooftops like nosy neighbors. Very peaceful, very organized, very Indus. Unlike Mesopotamia, which treated night like a cosmic battle between you and a demon sitting on your chest, the Indus Valley seems calm. No surviving texts mention dream omens, no nightmare spells, no rituals to chase off nocturnal ghosts, no panicked descriptions of sleep paralysis demons. Either A, they didn't write about it on clay tablets, or B, they just collectively decided not to stress about the supernatural at 2 a.m. And honestly, that's the kind of energy I admire. Instead, most evidence suggests that nighttime was simply nighttime. A time for rest, a time for routine, a time for quiet. Not a spiritual battlefield. Just sleep. Novel concept, right? Indus settlements had oil lamps, soft little terracotta dishes with wicks. Nothing too bright, nothing too dramatic. Perfect bedtime lighting. You can imagine a mother lighting a small lamp, a father folding a cotton cloth, kids blinking sleepily in the dim glow, neighbors settling around their courtyards, the gentle hush falling over the entire block. No loud chanting, no bustling market at midnight, no royal proclamations at weird hours, just relaxation. Now, here's something interesting. The Indus Valley was obsessed with cleanliness. In a good way. In a we have a full drainage system and personal washing rooms way, which for the Bronze Age is basically winning. People bathed regularly, daily even. So it's extremely likely that evening bathing, or at least rinsing, was part of the nighttime routine. Imagine ending the day with a bucket bath in a private alcove, clean water flowing through a brick drain, cool air drifting through the courtyard, the scent of baked earth and cotton cloth, a clean body in a clean home. And then, bed. Tell me that's not ideal.
Indus cities were huge but strangely quiet. Compared to Mesopotamia's chaotic symphony of donkeys, pots crashing, and priests yelling at ghosts, the Indus Valley seemed serene. Why? Streets were spacious, houses had privacy walls, activities were zoned, workshops were kept separate from homes, and drainage systems prevented stagnant, smelly water from causing noise and illness. Everything was laid out to reduce stress, which means sleep probably came easily to a lot of people. No midnight riots, no random festivals breaking out, no royal drama keeping you awake. Just the occasional dogfight probably, or someone dropping a clay bowl. Because humanity hasn't changed that much. Most families likely slept together or in adjacent rooms. Not in a chaotic pile, but in small family clusters. Parents with young children, siblings together, grandparents nearby, extended family in the same courtyard complex. Beds or mats were arranged neatly. Bedding was stored in recessed walls or platforms. Everything had its place. It's all very wholesome, very orderly, and very unlike the emotional meltdowns of European royal families we usually talk about. Honestly, the Indus Valley feels like spending a night at a relative's house where everyone is polite and drinks warm milk before bed. Night clothes were light cotton garments. Comfortable, loose, designed for airflow, perfect for heat. Blankets were woven, likely with cotton or wool during winter months. People layered their bedding depending on the season. During summer, thin cotton sheets, bare mats, open air sleeping on rooftops, no heavy covers, maximum ventilation. During winter, thicker cloth wraps, layered blankets, mats with extra padding, sleeping indoors instead of on rooftops. Very normal, very practical. We have no dream texts from the Indus Valley. None. So historians debate what they believed. Some think they didn't treat dreams as divine messages. Others think they might have, but wrote it on materials that didn't survive. Others think they understood dreams in a more psychological sense. It's one of the big mysteries. But the lack of dream tablets does give the civilization a refreshing vibe. Less superstition, more sleep. Imagine sleeping without worrying that a god is sending you passive-aggressive messages in your dreams. That's luxury. Indus cities probably had a gentle nighttime life. Quiet conversations, courtyard gatherings, soft lamps glowing, people walking roofs to escape heat, dogs patrolling alleys, merchants preparing goods for early morning transport, mothers soothing children to sleep, someone weaving or repairing cloth before bed. The steady trickle of water through drains, it's peaceful. The kind of atmosphere people today would pay for in a spa. Travelers likely slept in guest courtyards, in open shelters, on woven mats, under cloth canopies, with minimal belongings, near water sources, in groups for safety. Nothing dramatic, just simple routines. Again, very Indus Valley. Let's drift into it for a moment. Sunset settles over baked brick streets. Warm light fades. The heat slips away. The courtyard shadows grow long. A family finishes a light evening meal.
Grain bread, lentils, maybe a piece of fruit. Someone rinses dishes by the drain. Children wash their hands and splash each other. A mother lights a terracotta lamp. Neighbors greet each other softly. The sky fills with stars. People climb the stairs to the rooftop. Cotton mats unroll. A dog curls beside the wall. A warm breeze moves across the plain. No shouting, no chaos. Just the quiet rhythm of a civilization that somehow figured out how to mind its own business. It's almost too peaceful for history, but perfect for bedtime.
If you're still awake, that's admirable. If you're already halfway melted into your pillow, that's honestly the correct response to a 4-hour history monologue. Tonight, we are floating east, past the Himalayan wall, past the river plains, into the world of early dynasties, bamboo houses, silent courtyards, and philosophical debates that somehow lasted longer than most modern relationships. Welcome to ancient China, a place where people didn't just sleep, they thought about sleep. A lot. And they wrote about it with the calm conviction of people who believed harmony was not a suggestion but a lifestyle. Let's ease into it. Ancient China, especially during early dynasties like the Shang and Zhou, was a world shaped by natural rhythm. Daylight was for action, night was for rest, and the universe, ideally, was supposed to stay balanced enough that nobody's sleep got disturbed by cosmic nonsense. This desire for harmony shows up everywhere: architecture, furniture, rituals, even how people composed themselves before bed. In many ways, ancient Chinese sleep culture feels like the spiritual opposite of Mesopotamia's ghost on your chest approach. Here, nighttime wasn't dangerous, it was restorative, a returning to self, a nightly renewal that mirrored the cycles of nature. In a way, ancient China treated sleep with a respect that feels surprisingly modern. Early Chinese homes, especially in the north, were often built partially underground. These pit houses helped regulate temperature, staying cool in summer and warm in winter. Later, more sophisticated timber houses appeared. Courtyards at the center, wooden beams and tiled roofs, rooms arranged for airflow, family clusters grouped together, storage platforms built into the walls, and tucked into these rooms, beds. Actual beds. Beautiful ones. Furniture in ancient China wasn't chaotic or improvised. It was intentional, symmetrical, placed in a way that felt right. Sometimes spiritually right, long before feng shui became formalized. Even early houses show hints of directional preference. East-facing doors, north-south sleeping alignment, quiet inner rooms reserved for rest. Ancient Chinese beds evolved a lot over the centuries, but even early versions were surprisingly sophisticated. The basics: wooden platforms, raised above the ground, sometimes lacquered, sometimes decorated, often sturdy enough to last generations. The wealthy took this to another level. Their beds weren't just beds, they were micro-rooms. Enclosed canopy beds, curtains for warmth and privacy, carved wooden frames with animals, flowers, or auspicious symbols, soft mats layered with woven coverings, cushions made from hemp, wool, or early cotton. Sleeping in one of these was like drifting into a private little universe of carved wood and soft lamplight. Even the bedding had symbolic meaning: silk for purity, hemp for simplicity, patterns that promised good dreams, colors intended to soothe. Honestly, ancient Chinese elite bedrooms were the OG of soft aesthetic TikTok rooms, minus the LED lights. Let's talk about
pillows. Chinese pillows were firm, hard even, ceramic, wood, bamboo, or stone. Yes, stone. Before you grimace, here's the logic. Soft pillows were believed to drain energy, qi, from the body. Hard pillows kept the mind sharp and the spirit aligned. Some were beautifully shaped, curved, smooth, decorated with animals or painted flowers. Some even had tiny airflow holes to keep your head cool in summer. Some contained herbal fillings meant to promote peaceful dreams. Imagine choosing your pillow based on how spiritually aligned you want your spleen to feel tomorrow morning. That's ancient China. People slept in simple garments. Linen robes, thin hemp tunics, light silk wraps for the wealthy, loose sleeves, soft folds, enough coverage to stay modest, enough airflow to prevent overheating. Nightwear wasn't a separate category, it was just comfortable clothing worn around the home, especially in the evenings. Picture slow twilight routines, lanterns glowing, warm tea cooling on a table, people folding cloth robes, a household gradually settling into silence. Very serene, very intentional. Before bed, people often did gentle washing of face and hands, brushing hair smooth, drinking warm herbal infusions, burning incense in moderation, straightening bedding, checking windows and lanterns. Everything was about order, not superstition. Order. A tidy home meant a tidy mind. A calm room meant peaceful sleep. And peaceful sleep meant waking up in balance with nature. Some families recited short ancestral prayers. Not pleading, not fearful, just respectful acknowledgments. A quiet moment to settle the heart. Everything whispers calm. Dream interpretation existed, but without panic. There were dream books, yes, but instead of a demon sat on you, they leaned more into symbolism, balance, moral reflection, emotional clarity. If you dreamt of water, it meant reflection or change. If you dreamed of ancestors, it meant guidance. If you dreamed of awkwardly falling off of something, it meant, well, you should probably rethink a decision. People took dreams seriously, but not dramatically. A dream was a hint, not a threat. Scholars even wrote essays about why people dream. Some blamed emotion. Some blamed diet. Some blamed cosmic imbalance. Some just shrugged. But the vibe remained calm. Ancient Chinese philosophers deeply considered sleep. Confucius believed sleep should be modest and balanced. No excess, no laziness. A well-rested mind was ethical. A tired mind was sloppy. Taoists saw sleep as harmony with nature. Rest wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. Night was yin, the passive, dark, quiet energy, and resisting it was pointless. So give in. Float. Let the universe hold you. Medical scholars tied sleep to qi flow. Move with the seasons. Rest early in winter. Wake early in summer. Align with nature's clock, not your own preferences. Altogether, the message was simple. Sleep is not an inconvenience. Sleep is wisdom. Honestly, that's something every overstressed adult should hear every night.
China has hot summers and cold winters, and ancient homes adjusted. Summer, sleeping on bamboo mats. opening windows, using silk fans, sleeping in courtyards, using light netting to deter insects. Winter, thick quilts, shared bedding for warmth, heated floors in northern regions, dogs or livestock sleeping near homes for extra heat, heavy curtains around canopy beds. The goal? Never fight nature. Work with it. Let sleep adapt as the seasons change. Night lighting was soft. Oil lamps, bronze lamps with reflectors, porcelain lanterns, thin paper screens that diffuse the light. Nothing harsh, nothing bright enough to ruin melatonin. Not that they knew what melatonin was, but they instinctively protected it. A typical nighttime scene. A single lantern glowing, shapes soft and warm, shadows gentle, people moving slowly. A room dim enough that your eyes begin to relax without effort. It's the perfect environment for drifting. Unlike the noise-heavy civilizations of the West, ancient Chinese cities generally quieted down after sunset. Homes were enclosed, courtyards absorbed sound, night markets closed early. People respected rest. Even the animals, trained dogs, courtyard birds, quieted themselves. The loudest nighttime sound was usually the wind. Imagine that today. Most families slept in shared or adjacent rooms. Parents with infants, children in side rooms, grandparents in warmer corners, extended relatives nearby. Wealthier families had more separation, but still kept rooms near one another for safety and harmony. Children fell asleep to soft storytelling, gentle singing, the rustle of silk clothing, the sound of someone blowing out a lantern. No shouting, no panic, no ghost worries. Just steady quiet. Travelers slept in roadside inns, in family guest rooms, on portable bamboo mats, under silk canopies, wrapped in thick traveling cloaks. Caravans often slept in groups for safety. Guards stayed awake in rotation. People used small travel lamps, and bedding was rolled neatly and strapped to carts. Even traveling sleep was organized. Let's drift into it. The sun lowers, turning tiled roofs golden. Courtyards cool. Bamboo leaves whisper. A family finishes a bowl of warm rice. A kettle steams softly. A mother braids her daughter's hair. Someone gently sweeps the threshold. Lanterns glow behind paper screens. A father folds bedding with practiced care. The night settles like a calm blanket over the home. No fear, no rush, just harmony, rhythm, the quiet philosophy of sleep. A child climbs into a wooden bed. Silk rustles. A soft curtain closes. The lantern goes out. The household drifts into night like a leaf settling onto still water. Balanced, quiet, timeless.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Settle in, stretch a little, maybe adjust your blankets. Tonight we're slowly floating east again because apparently no ancient civilization knew how to sleep normally. At this point, we've seen Egyptians who slept like cats, Mesopotamians who slept like security guards, Greeks who slept like philosophers who had way too many thoughts, and Romans who slept wherever they collapsed after yelling at their slaves. Beautiful.
So now, let's drift into ancient Persia, a world of immaculate beards, impeccable robes, very large palaces, and an entire imperial system built on the simple principle of let's make everything dramatically bigger than necessary. Their palaces, gigantic. Their beds, strangely practical. Their kings, usually exhausted from trying to keep the entire empire from falling apart like a poorly baked flatbread. So let's dim our inner torches and sink into the soft, faintly perfumed nighttime of the Achaemenid Empire. The Achaemenids, think Cyrus the Great, Darius, Xerxes, ruled a territory so absurdly huge that just walking across it took longer than most of their marriages survived. You'd assume they slept like stressed CEOs who kept a dagger under the pillow, and honestly, you'd be correct. Persian nobles liked comfort, but not clutter. Their rooms were airy with high ceilings, thick curtains, and carpets that probably cost more than a house in Babylon. They loved rugs because rugs were basically the ancient Persian version of interior flex. Hello, welcome to my home. Please admire my floor. Yes, I'm wealthy. Beds, though, they didn't go full Egyptian luxury or Roman chaos. Persian beds were often sturdy wooden frames, slightly elevated, topped with layers of wool or feather blankets. The main comfort factor was temperature control. Persia is hot in the day, cold at night, the climatic equivalent of mood swings. So they developed very thick nighttime quilts, soft wool cushions, and most importantly, perfumed textiles. Yes, their blankets smelled nice. Meanwhile, medieval Europe would still be centuries away from beds that did not smell like sadness. Persian kings had guard shifts, guard captains, night patrols, and sometimes a second guard to make sure the first guard wasn't plotting something. It was not exactly a peaceful vibe. Imagine trying to sleep while 12 men in bronze helmets stand around your bedroom pretending not to notice you snoring. Kings also rotated where they slept. Not for fun, for paranoia. Assassination was a popular career path. So yes, Persian royal sleep habits. Comfortable bed, nice blankets, 0 REM cycles because you're terrified of being stabbed. Let's glide on. Persians loved afternoon rest. Not quite a Spanish siesta, but very close. Middle of the day, too hot. Productivity, optional. Napping, encouraged, especially for nobles. Soldiers, farmers, and laborers obviously didn't get fancy naps, but the elite? Oh, they napped like it was a tax deduction. This gave Persian days a particular rhythm. Early wake-up, morning duties, afternoon nap, long dinner, long storytelling, and then a kind of late bedtime. It's nice to imagine, honestly. Ancient Persia probably had more well-rested aristocrats than any other empire. Persians took dreams seriously. This is the recurring theme of all ancient civilizations. Nobody slept normally, and everybody thought dreams were either divine messages or cosmic warnings. The Zoroastrian worldview added a layer of metaphysical drama. Dreams could be Asha, truth, order, goodness, or Druj, chaos, deceit, cosmic nonsense. So imagine the average noble waking up like, well, good morning. My dream was 60% chaos, 40% cosmic nonsense. Excellent. Dream interpreters existed, not as formal institutions like in Mesopotamia, but more like important court astrologers who moonlighted as therapists. Your dream of a burning tower probably means you're stressed. Yes, thank you. Insightful. Nighttime in a Persian palace was, well, deliberately quiet. Servants moved like ghosts. There were strict rules. No loud noises, no sudden movements, no clattering jars. It was essentially the first form of don't wake the baby, except the baby was a king with absolute power. Lighting was minimal, tiny oil lamps placed strategically so as not to start fires. Persians were surprisingly fire conscious for an age where everyone else seemed to set their drapes ablaze weekly. Royal women, meanwhile, slept in separate quarters, not because of romance or modesty, mostly because palace politics were basically a never-ending soap opera. So we're moving from pre-Islamic Persia
into the early centuries of Islamic civilization from the 7th century onward. And, well, this is where things get interesting in a very quiet, very sleep-friendly way. Because while early Christians were debating how many angels could dance on a pin, early Islamic scholars were writing calmly about the structure of sleep, health benefits, dreams, and how people should arrange their nights. They basically created a sleep wellness movement 1,300 years before modern influencers did.
Islamic scholars, especially in the Abbasid period, cared deeply about circadian rhythm, digestive cycles, sleep posture, nighttime routines. This was shockingly modern. Many early texts suggested you start by sleeping on your right side, then shift to your left. Why? Because digestion. Ancient physicians were obsessed with digestion the same way modern tech bros are obsessed with hydration. People genuinely believed your stomach would behave if you slept in the correct pose. And honestly, it kind of does. The kailula, or midday nap, was normal. Farmers napped after morning work, merchants napped between customers, scholars napped because they had stayed up too late reading Aristotle for fun. The entire medieval Islamic world was basically functioning on Mediterranean nap logic. Average people had a simple schedule. Sleep early, wake up before dawn, go back to sleep, sometimes, resume morning tasks. So yes, humans everywhere seemed to enjoy breaking their nights into chunks. This was still segmented sleep, the same pattern we saw in ancient and medieval Europe. Humanity has been fighting against 8-hour uninterrupted sleep since the dawn of time. If ancient Egyptians were obsessed with dreams, and Mesopotamians wrote the longest dream manuals, then the early Islamic world produced the most systematic, philosophical dream analysis tradition. The most famous example? Ibn Siryn, who basically became the celebrity dream interpreter of the entire Middle Ages. People quoted his book more than modern people quote astrology memes. Dreams were sorted into true dreams from God, false dreams from nafs, the self, chaotic dreams from external whispers, stress, digestive issues, or seeing too many weird animals during the day. Ancient and medieval dream interpretation always boiled down to, you probably ate something strange. But the Islamic tradition at least tried to categorize things methodically. Let's drift to Baghdad around the 9th century. Picture dim lanterns, quiet streets, gentle river sounds, and somewhere in the distance, the faint laughter of poets who've had too much wine but will deny it. Baghdad at night was busy. Not chaotic like Rome, not ceremonial like Egypt, not sleepy like Greece. Baghdad had night markets, learning circles, musicians, public baths open late, scholars reading until dawn, philosophers debating about mercury poisoning. So sleep became flexible. People slept when they were tired. They napped. They woke up for prayer. They stayed up late for poetry gatherings. Sleep researchers today would call it polyphasic sleep, but medieval Baghdadis would call it, I'll sleep later, I'm busy living my best intellectual life. Beds varied widely, but one big difference from Europe, people used floor bedding commonly. Thick cushions, rugs, layered mats, far more hygienic than straw pallets used by medieval Europeans, which were basically compost piles shaped like a rectangle. Wealthy homes might have wooden frames with rich textiles, but the average person slept on cushions, carpets, mattresses stuffed with cotton or wool. Cotton, by the way, was common. Unlike Europe, where cotton was so exotic, people weren't sure whether it grew on plants or sheep. So yes, medieval Muslims sometimes had softer beds than medieval kings in Europe. A fun fact you didn't know you needed. One standout feature, night hygiene mattered. People washed hands, face, feet, and sometimes even rinsed the mouth before bed. This is revolutionary compared to Europe, where medieval peasants were going to bed like, bath, I'll have one this decade.
Cleanliness before sleep was symbolic, calming, purifying, routine-based. It made bedtime feel like a ritual, and humanity loves rituals, especially ones involving warm water. Early Islamic cities at night were quiet. No taverns screaming, no drunk Romans smashing objects, no Greek philosophers trying to prove something loudly. Nighttime was a calm space because society encouraged collective respect of rest. Even markets regulated noise after sundown. Shopkeepers could get fined for yelling too loudly late at night. Imagine that. A civilization that legally restricted nighttime chaos. Modern cities could take notes. Family arrangements varied widely. Wealthy homes, separate rooms. Middle homes, partitioned areas. Poor homes, everyone sharing the floor but with designated corners. The idea of privacy was respected more than in Greece and Rome, where families basically slept like a pile of confused puppies. Curtains and screens created personal sleep zones. Think ancient studio apartment dividers. Islamic architecture loved airflow. Wind catchers, open courtyards, shaded walkways. Night breezes entered homes naturally. It's elegant, sustainable, and honestly, something modern architecture forgot how to do. So people slept comfortably even in hot climates. Meanwhile, in medieval Europe, let's build a house with no airflow at all and hope we don't melt. So now we've wandered through Persian royal insomnia, royal rugs that probably cost a small empire, Islamic scholars inventing sleep science, Baghdad's functioning on 2 a.m. poetry, cotton mattresses, quiet nights enforced by law, and the surprisingly hygienic bedtime routines of early Islamic societies. Let's glide forward next time into India, China, and Japan, where sleep becomes an art form, a spiritual exercise, and occasionally a philosophical debate about whether sleep even exists.
Hey guys, welcome back. Settle in, get comfortable, maybe adjust your pillow or pretend you're on a royal cotton mattress from 2,000 years ago. Tonight we're gliding into ancient India, where people somehow managed to turn sleep into a medical category, a spiritual gateway, a philosophical mystery, and also a practical thing you do because your body is tired. Ancient India was a place where everything had a theory. If the Greeks intellectualized their thoughts and the Chinese organized their nights like an efficient bureaucracy, India basically looked at the entire cosmos and said, yes, this all makes sense, and also we have 6 different explanations for why you're sleepy. So let's float gently into the soft nighttime air of the Indian subcontinent, where monsoon breezes blew through palm leaves, oil lamps flickered quietly, and households settled into routines that somehow blended science, spirituality, and the please stop talking, it's bedtime energy all at once. Let's start far back, around the Vedic period. This is a world where people lived in wooden structures, tended fires, sang hymns, and apparently slept pretty normally, but with a heavy dose of cosmic interpretation. One early Vedic idea was that sleep was a temporary death, not in a horror sense, just your self goes offline, but don't worry, it comes back in the morning. This is surprisingly relatable. You fall asleep after a long day and your soul basically says, I'm clocking out, see you in 8 hours, or 3 if you have a baby. People in the Vedic age had a healthy respect for nighttime. Darkness meant wandering spirits, uncertain energies, creatures that probably wanted your goats. So bedtime rituals often involved reciting hymns, protecting the fire, asking the gods for safe sleep. It was less spooky and more, I'd like to wake up tomorrow in the same condition, thanks. Now, this is where ancient India really shines, because Ayurveda, the traditional medical system, has entire sections dedicated to sleep, not casual recommendations, full-on chapters. While medieval Europe was treating insomnia by telling people to drink warm wine and stop being melancholic, Ayurveda had biological explanations, behavioral recommendations, daily rhythms, and chronobiology theories.
Yes, ancient Indian doctors basically invented sleep hygiene before it was cool. Ayurveda says life depends on food, sleep, balanced sexual energy, a surprisingly accurate list, honestly. Sleep was categorized carefully. Healthy sleep, oversleeping, insufficient sleep, disturbed sleep, seasonal sleep patterns. Ayurvedic physicians would absolutely shame modern influencers for thinking they discovered circadian rhythms. Ayurveda offered sleep posture guidelines. Avoid sleeping face down, avoid sleeping in awkward twisted shapes, so basically don't be a cat. Sleeping on the left side aids digestion. Sleeping on the right side calms the nervous system. Not bad. Modern chiropractors would approve. 3. Sleep scheduling based on seasons. In winter, more sleep. In summer, less sleep. During the monsoon, sleep whenever the humidity crushes your soul. Basically, ancient India understood seasonal affective disorder. Meanwhile, medieval Europeans were just wondering why winter felt terrible. Ancient Indian beds varied a lot depending on wealth, but compared to many regions of the ancient world, they often leaned toward actual comfort. 1. The legendary charpai, or woven rope bed, is one of the oldest and most genius inventions ever. It's a wooden frame with tightly woven ropes. That's it. Simple, but breathable, supportive, perfect in hot climates, and easily repairable. Modern designers still try to reinvent things that the charpai did perfectly 3,000 years ago. Unlike Egyptian beds with lion legs or Roman beds that collapsed under drunk men, Indian elite beds were carved, sturdy, decorated with textiles, and often low to the ground. They were more functional than flashy. A nice change. The floor wasn't just the poor bed. It was actually comfortable with thick cotton quilts, layered mats, wool blankets in winter, and mosquito nets in summer. Floor sleeping cultures tend to have fewer back issues, and ancient India was ahead of the orthopedic game. Oil lamps were used sparingly, not because people were cheap. Lamps attracted insects, and insects attract other things, and suddenly you have a food chain unfolding in your house. So most families wound down early. People went to bed not because of discipline, but because darkness didn't care about your productivity goals. Homes often had inner rooms, shaded verandas, open courtyards, and shaded sleeping platforms. People moved around according to weather. In summer, sleeping outside on the veranda was common. In winter, people grouped near the stove or hearth. It was flexible and intuitive, unlike modern society, which tries to force a single 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. schedule on everyone.
Ancient Indians loved thinking. They thought about thinking. They thought about dreams. They thought about the soul thinking during dreams. Dreams were classified into meaningful, meaningless, caused by food, caused by stress, caused by spirits, caused by imagination, caused by wish fulfillment, caused by cosmic messages, caused by who knows what. They basically invented a full dream taxonomy centuries before Freud showed up and said, "It's probably your mother." Dreaming was one of the states of consciousness. Sleep wasn't just physical, it was metaphysical. The self, Atman, wanders in dreams. Thought becomes creation. Dreams reveal inner truths. Very poetic, much more dignified than "you dreamed about cows because you saw a cow today." Early Buddhists focused on mental cleansing, subconscious patterning, illusions, and non-attachment. Dreams were sometimes meaningful, but mostly a reminder, none of this is real, please calm down. Buddhism has the world's most soothing approach to nightmares. If you ever feel guilty about oversleeping, remember, ancient Indian monks intentionally slept very little. Some Buddhist monks slept sitting, lightly dozing, on platforms, leaning on nothing. Their goal was to avoid indulgence. My goal is to avoid sleeping in a way that feels like airport seating. Different priorities.
If you're still awake, congratulations. If you're half asleep, even better. Because part 8 is where we drift into the soft, shadowy world of ancient bedtime rituals.
the strange little things people did before sleeping, long before alarm clocks, ceiling fans, or doom scrolling existed. So, get comfortable, take a slow breath, and let's wander into the past, one candle flicker at a time. The Sumerians believed sleep wasn't just rest, it was a cosmic reboot. Before they slept, they recited a soft prayer to ask the gods to guard the gates of dreams. They placed small clay figurines near their beds, tiny guardians meant to protect the dreamer from spirits wandering in the night. Imagine falling asleep knowing your dream security system is a clay doll. But hey, it worked for them. The Egyptians treated bedtime as an art form. Before sleeping, many would smell blue lotus flowers, believing the scent opened the mind to divine visions. Some priests even slept in special dream chambers, hoping their god would send them messages. If your dreams ever feel weird, just know the Egyptians were voluntarily trying to make them weirder. Greek doctors believed you had to balance your body's 4 humors before sleep. So their bedtime routine? A warm bath, a tiny snack, light stretching, and occasionally drinking diluted wine purely for medical reasons. Sure, Hippocrates, whatever you say. Medieval people didn't have electricity, phones, or anything fun, really. So their bedtime ritual was simple. They sat by the fire, stared at the fire, sometimes talked to the fire, and then they literally covered the fire with a metal lid called a cover-few, which eventually became the word curfew. So the next time someone says curfew, know it originally meant go put your fire to sleep. Viking bedtime had a vibe. Before sleep, they whispered the names of ancestors for protection. They believed these spirits would sit beside them, guarding the night. Some buried small charms under their pillows. Some slept with their weapons nearby. Some probably snored loud enough to scare spirits away without help. Scholars in the Islamic world had surprisingly modern bedtime rituals. Doctors recommended cleaning the room, drinking water, avoiding heavy food, and sleeping on the right side first for digestion. It's basically the 10th century version of a sleep hygiene TikTok. In traditional China, bedtime was a spiritual transition. People burned incense to purify the mind, especially sandalwood or plum blossom. Poets even wrote about the moment before sleep. The moon climbs the window. The mind empties its last worry. Imagine ending every day with poetry instead of stress scrolling. Many indigenous cultures treated dreams as part of who you are. Before sleep, they prepared for dreams like preparing for a journey. Some sang soft songs, lit herbs, sage or sweetgrass, placed symbolic items beside the bed. Dreams weren't random. Dreams were guides. Imagine waking up and saying, "Ah yes, last night I spoke to the forest. Very productive meeting." In traditional Japan, sleep was linked to purification. People washed their face, hands, and sometimes feet before lying on a futon. Some households clapped softly once before sleep to clear lingering spirits. Even going to bed had an aesthetic. The Maori believed that each breath before sleep connected them to their ancestors. Some recited short poetry or lullabies, not for children, but for themselves. A soft way to remind their heart, you are not alone.
If you're still here, still listening, still drifting, you're doing great. Part 9 takes us into the deep, heavy silence of night in the ancient world, a time that was darker, colder,
and far more unpredictable than anything we know today. So, settle in, loosen your shoulders, let your eyes get a little heavier, because we're about to explore what people feared, felt, and faced when the sun went down. We modern people rarely see true darkness. Even at night, we have streetlights, screens, glowing signs, blinking LEDs. But for most of human history, night was black, ink black, a darkness that swallowed everything. People described it as a blanket over the world, a creature with no face, a silence waiting to move. Imagine walking outside and seeing nothing, not even your hand. It made night feel endless, alive, mysterious. Fire was light, fire was safety, but fire was expensive. Most people didn't burn candles casually. A single candle could cost half a day's wages in some medieval towns. So nights were usually spent in near darkness, with one tiny flame in a corner, or with no light at all. Imagine your entire home lit by something smaller than your thumb. No wonder the night felt deeper. Every culture, without fail, filled the dark with stories, ghosts, ancestors, demons, forest spirits, restless souls, shadow creatures. And remember, these stories weren't entertainment. They were explanations. People heard strange noises, wolves howling, owls, wind, shifting wood. And their minds shaped those sounds into meaning. Because when you can't see what's out there, your imagination volunteers something. Humans didn't rule the dark. Animals did. Before modern cities, nighttime wasn't quiet. It was loud. Wolves howling, bears moving through underbrush, owls screeching, stray dogs roaming, wildcats crying like human babies. Imagine hearing that outside your door with nothing but a wooden bar to protect you. Every sound felt like a threat. Every rustle was a possibility. Most ancient and medieval towns had a simple rule: do not travel at night. Not because of laws, but because of danger. Roads were used by thieves, desperate wanderers, runaway fugitives, hungry animals, and occasionally patrols who didn't like questions. Night travel was like walking into a fog of uncertainty, so people stayed home. Doors locked, windows barred, fires covered. Night was an event people prepared for, like a storm. Dreams were mysterious, powerful, sometimes frightening. People thought dreams could be prophecies, warnings, visits from the dead, signs from gods, echoes of yesterday, or glimpses of tomorrow. A nightmare wasn't just a nightmare. It was a message. Some families even kept dream books to interpret symbols. So if you dreamed of a crow or a river or a broken cup, someone could tell you what fate was trying to whisper. But here's the gentle truth beneath the fear. In the ancient world, night was also peace. No chores, no work, no travel, no noise. The world simply paused. People gathered close. Hearths glowed softly. Voices whispered. Sleep wrapped itself around households like a blanket. So yes, night was scary, but it was also the great equalizer, the great stillness, the moment when even kings and farmers shared the same darkness.
If you're still here, still listening, still drifting, you're doing great. Part 9 takes us into the deep, heavy silence of night in the ancient world, a a time that was darker, colder, and far more unpredictable than anything we know today. So, settle in. Loosen your shoulders. Let your eyes get a little heavier, because we're about to explore what people feared, felt, and faced when the sun went down. We modern people rarely see true darkness. Even at night, we have streetlights, screens, glowing signs, blinking LEDs. But for most of human history, night was black, ink black, a darkness that swallowed everything. People described it as a blanket over the world, a creature with no face, a silence waiting to move. Imagine walking outside and seeing nothing, not even your hand. It made night feel endless, alive, mysterious. Fire was light. Fire was safety. But fire was expensive. Most people didn't burn candles casually. A single candle could cost half a day's wages in some medieval towns. So nights were usually spent in near darkness, with one tiny flame in a corner, or with no light at all. Imagine your entire home lit by something smaller than your thumb. No wonder the night felt deeper. Every culture, without fail, filled the dark with stories. Ghosts, ancestors, demons, forest spirits, restless souls, shadow creatures. And remember, these stories weren't entertainment. They were explanations. People heard strange noises, wolves, owls, wind, shifting wood, and their minds shaped those sounds into meaning. Because when you can't see what's out there, your imagination volunteers something. Humans didn't rule the dark. Animals did. Before modern cities, nighttime wasn't quiet. It was loud. Wolves howling, bears moving through underbrush, owls screeching, stray dogs roaming, wildcats crying like human babies. Imagine hearing that outside your door with nothing but a wooden bar to protect you. Every sound felt like a threat. Every rustle was a possibility. Most ancient and medieval towns had a simple rule: do not travel at night. Not because of laws, but because of danger. Roads were used by thieves, desperate wanderers, runaway fugitives, hungry animals, and occasionally patrols who didn't like questions. Night travel was like walking into a fog of uncertainty. So people stayed home. Doors locked, windows barred, fires covered. Night was an event people prepared for, like a storm. Dreams were mysterious, powerful, sometimes frightening. People thought dreams could be prophecies, warnings, visits from the dead, signs from gods, echoes of yesterday, or glimpses of tomorrow. A nightmare wasn't just a nightmare. It was a message. Some families even kept dream books to interpret symbols. So if you dreamed of a crow, or a river, or a broken cup, someone could tell you what fate was trying to whisper. But here's the gentle truth beneath the fear. In the ancient world, night was also peace. No chores, no work, no travel, no noise. The world simply paused. People gathered close, hearths glowed softly, voices whispered. Sleep wrapped itself around households like a blanket. So yes, night was scary, but it was also the great equalizer, the great stillness. the moment when even kings and farmers shared the same darkness.
If you've made it all the way here, still drifting, still listening, still floating along with me through thousands of years of bedtime, then part 10 is the soft landing, the exhale after the long night. Tonight, we're talking about something simple, something quiet. Despite what you might imagine, people in ancient civilizations didn't leap out of bed like a caffeinated rooster. They woke up gradually, often with stiff backs from straw beds, the chilled air of dawn sneaking under blankets, aching limbs from yesterday's labor, a general "I'm not ready for this" vibe that is shockingly relatable. Most households stirred before sunrise, but it wasn't a cheerful Disney movie morning. It was more like, fine, the sun's coming, I guess. Some things just never change. Natural light was everything. People didn't have phones, alarms, clocks. They had the sky. As soon as the horizon started glowing, chickens made their presence known, dogs started pacing, farmers muttered to themselves, markets prepared for another chaotic day, and temples readied for morning rituals. You didn't sleep in. The sun decided when your day began. A cosmic alarm clock with no snooze button. In Egypt, Greece, Rome, China, and even early Mesopotamia, morning routines were surprisingly similar. People usually washed their faces with cold water, tied or braided hair, adjusted or wrapped their clothing, lit a small fire if they were lucky enough to have one, ate a modest breakfast, often more survival than enjoyment. Breakfast wasn't glamorous. No pancakes, no eggs Benedict, no artisanal coffees. Just some bread, porridge, maybe a piece of fruit, or whatever hadn't spoiled overnight. A true live, laugh, loaf of ancient carbs moment. Most civilizations believed dawn wasn't just a time of day. It was a cleansing, a reset. To many, light was sacred. Egyptians greeted Ra as he sailed across the sky. Greeks honored Eos, the rosy-fingered dawn. Romans thanked household gods before stepping outside. Chinese rituals emphasized harmony with the new day. Indigenous cultures worldwide saw sunrise as rebirth. Morning wasn't about rushing. It was about acknowledging existence itself. A little dramatic, sure, but also kind of beautiful. The ancient world didn't wait. As soon as the light was usable, farmers were in the fields, potters were at their wheels, merchants opened stalls, builders carried stones, priests prepared sacrifices, scribes started writing things nobody wanted to read, except future historians. Work began early because evenings were unpredictable and nights were dangerous. You got things done while it was brighter, warmer, and less cursed. People were tired, constantly. They didn't sleep 8 hours straight. They didn't have ergonomic pillows, blackout curtains, or memory foam anything. Segmented sleep, darkness, noise, cold, hunger, animals, all made nights imperfect. So mornings carried a sleepy sluggishness we'd recognize instantly. Imagine 5,000 years of humanity collectively saying, just 5 more minutes. Night closed the world. Morning reopened it. When neighbors met at wells,
or families gathered around early meals, or elders watched dawn from their doorsteps, that was when the information traveled. Morning was when the world caught up with itself. A sort of ancient version of checking your notifications, just with fewer emojis and slightly more goats. And that brings us gently, softly, calmly to the end of part 10. We've walked through ancient cities at dusk, listened to their nights, peeked into their dreams, felt their fears, and now watched their world wake up. If your eyes are heavy, or your breath is slow, or you've forgotten where part 5 ended, perfect. You're supposed to.
If you're here for part 11, you've made it through enough ancient nights that you basically deserve honorary citizenship in every civilization we've talked about. So let's keep drifting. Tonight, we're leaving the cozy household beds behind. Those straw piles, reed mats, wooden platforms, questionable wool blankets, and walking straight into one of the most unpredictable parts of the ancient world. Sleep while traveling. Because nothing says sweet dreams like trying to rest on a dirt road with one eye open and a donkey breathing in your ear. So, lie back. Let your shoulders fall. Let everything go a little soft and blurry. And let's wander through how ancient people tried, sometimes badly, to sleep away from home. You didn't just hop over to another city. Travel was a commitment, a journey that could take days, weeks, or entire seasons if the weather hated you. And because the world before electricity shut down at night, travelers had to stop whenever daylight faded. No lantern-lit highways, no headlights, no roadside motels with questionable decor. Just the long, dark world and whatever shelter you could find. Most travelers slept outside, under the stars, next to their carts, beside their animals, or sometimes literally in their animals' hay. Not very glamorous, but it worked. You'd bundle up in a cloak, find a semi-flat surface, and hope nothing with teeth wandered too close. Ancient writers often complained that the ground was rocky, the insects were relentless, the nights were cold, and the animals were loud. Imagine trying to fall asleep while goats argue next to you, or a camel sighs dramatically every 20 minutes. A true lullaby of the ancient world. Hollywood loves to show ancient soldiers with sturdy, neat canvas tents. Reality? No. Most travel tents were heavy, leaky, poorly stitched, and aggressively uncooperative. Wind loved them. Rain loved them more. Nothing says sweet dreams like being soaked at 3 a.m. under a badly tied animal skin tarp. Even kings had tents that would make a modern camper cry. Ancient inns were the ancestors of budget motels. If the budget was zero and the amenities were a floor, a roof, maybe, a bowl of something edible if you were lucky, and the company of far too many strangers snoring beside you. One Roman writer described inns as places where sleep is attempted but rarely found, which honestly sounds accurate. Beds were rare, privacy was non-existent, noise was guaranteed. You never knew who else would be sleeping 3 inches away from you. A merchant, a soldier, a drunk poet, a goat, someone's cousin, a thief pretending not to be a thief. Truly the ancient version of Airbnb, just with more fleas. If you didn't have an inn, or couldn't tolerate one, campfires were salvation. Fire kept animals away, spirits at bay according to superstition, and warmth close. Travelers gathered around flames, shared stories, chewed on slightly burnt bread, and then drifted off to sleep with embers glowing beside them, a gentle orange heartbeat in the dark. And if you fell asleep staring at the sparks,
Congratulations! You invented the ancient ASMR experience. Roadside sleep depended heavily on water. If a stream was nearby, travelers stopped early. If there was no water, they walked until exhaustion forced them down somewhere dusty and miserable. Some ancient travel guides literally said things like, "Do not sleep near rivers unless you enjoy insects. Do not sleep on hills unless you enjoy wind. Do not sleep near towns unless they enjoy robbing travelers." Extremely helpful. Travelers didn't tie their animals far away. No, animals slept with them. Not out of affection, but because you didn't want your donkey stolen. Animals provided warmth, they made noise if something approached, and they were essentially portable alarm systems. So travelers often slept in a loose circle with their animals on the outside. Imagine dozing off with a cow breathing loudly, a horse shifting, a donkey sighing dramatically, and a goat being whatever goats are. Beautiful? Not exactly. But safe? Mostly. Even peaceful travelers kept something near their sleeping spot. A stick, a dagger, a club, or in some cultures, a small bronze blade specifically designed for travel nights. Not because they expected to fight, but because, well, the world was unpredictable. The night was large. The road was lonely, and humans have always slept better when they feel prepared. Unlike in their homes, travelers rarely fell into deep sleep. Light sleep was a survival skill. You stayed half aware, half alert, half ready to wake up, and fully annoyed at everything around you. Ancient travel descriptions often say things like, "I slept with one eye open. I rested but did not dream. I lay down until the world grew gray again." Because that's what travel sleep was. Not rest, just waiting. Despite the discomfort, the cold, the noises, the bugs, the chaos, there were moments ancient travelers describe with absolute wonder. A sky so bright with stars it looked like dust. Cool breezes whispering through desert grasses, moonlight reflecting off distant rivers, silence so deep you could hear your heartbeat. The comfort of a warm fire beside familiar faces, or the strange peace of being between destinations, belonging to neither place, and yet welcomed by the open world. These moments appear again and again in ancient travel writings, tiny pockets of calm, little gifts of the night, where humans realize that the world could be harsh, but also profoundly beautiful.
Either way, we're here again. The lantern is lit. The night is quiet. And we're settling into another slow journey through the ancient world. Tonight's topic is one every civilization understood, rich or poor, king or shepherd. How people slept when they were sick. Because illness was common and treatments were confusing. And sleep? Well, sleep was the only universal medicine. So, make yourself comfortable, let your breathing slow, let your attention soften at the edges, and let's drift gently into the beds of ancient patients. Ancient medicine, across nearly every culture, had one shared idea: let them sleep. Sleep was seen as a healer, a balancer, a divine reset, a way for the body to reorganize itself, as one Roman doctor wrote. No matter the illness, cold, fever, aches, sadness, sleep was prescribed like a universal cure. Honestly, ancient doctors were basically saying, try sleeping it off and see what happens. Relatable. If you've ever tried to sleep while sick, you know it's a struggle. Now imagine doing it on straw, on reeds, on mats stuffed with whatever plant was nearby.
on hard wooden planks. Comfort was a luxury. Sick people often piled up every blanket they owned. Some added extra furs or folded cloaks for padding. And even then, comfort was approximate. When someone was ill, they weren't left alone. Households became quiet little care centers. Someone brought water, someone tended the fire, someone checked breathing, someone whispered prayers, someone sat awake just in case. It wasn't medical expertise, just company. Ancient sources describe this as keeping vigil, which sounds dramatic, but really just means trying not to fall asleep in a chair while making sure Uncle Marcus doesn't roll into the wall again. Nearly every culture had nighttime remedies. Warm goat's milk in Greece, honey water in Rome, spiced rice water in India, herbal infusions in China, diluted wine in the Mediterranean, mild barley drinks in Mesopotamia. These weren't exactly tasty. Some were basically ancient NyQuil without the mint. But they made the body warm and heavy and helped the sick drift into sleep more easily. Some doctors insisted the sick should sleep in fresh air. Others said they should stay sealed inside warm rooms. Both sides argued endlessly. Meanwhile, the patient lay there thinking, please, just pick a side, it's cold. Ventilation choices depended on beliefs. Egyptians opened windows to let spirits leave. Greeks used airflow to balance humors. Romans feared drafts but liked open courtyards. Chinese medicine emphasized seasonal winds. Every culture had a different opinion. None of them involved the patient getting an actual vote. When sick people slept, their dreams were considered meaningful. Dreams could reveal the cause of sickness, the spirit involved, the imbalance of humors, a warning, or a cure. Priests, healers, and even relatives tried to interpret dreams. A dream of mud, too much dampness in the body. A dream of being chased, inner heat rising. A dream of water, a cleansing coming. Ancient dream logic was basically saying, if you dreamed it, the universe is trying to send a postcard. Temperature mattered. Most sick rooms had gentle heat, a small brazier, a low fire, heated stones, or warm cloths tucked near the body. Not hot, not cold, just enough to keep shivers away and lull the body into sleep. But because ancient heating was unpredictable, sometimes it got too hot or smoked up the room. And nothing says restful sleep like coughing at 2 a.m. because the fire had opinions about your life. Many ancient remedies doubled as sleep aids. Herbs like poppy, mandrake, valerian, chamomile, mint, fenugreek were used widely. Some were strong, some were gentle. Some tasted like sadness. But they all shared the same goal: get the patient to drift off. Let sleep do the work. Even the roughest doctors agreed. When the body sleeps, healing begins. Ancient texts are surprisingly honest about this. Patients often describe nights as longer, colder, heavier, more emotional, more uncertain. Illness always felt worse at night, and households felt it. People whispered more, fires were tended more carefully, the sick were checked more often, and hope lingered in the quiet. Maybe they'll sleep deeply tonight. Despite the fear and discomfort, despite the aching bodies and the imperfect remedies, there was also tenderness. Someone adjusting a blanket, someone whispering a story, someone sharing warm food, someone staying awake so the sick person didn't have to. Ancient sickness, like ancient sleep, wasn't solitary. It was communal, soft, human. And sleep, however restless, was the thread that held the night together.
You're basically an honorary ancient insomniac by now. You've slept in deserts, palaces, forests, inns, sick rooms, ships, and more. So tonight, let's drift into something quieter, something softer, something every ancient household did every single day for thousands of years. The evening wind down, that gentle little routine between sunset and sleep. When the world dimmed, voices softened, and people moved slowly, almost instinctively, toward rest. If you're not already sleepy, don't worry, you will be. Let's breathe in deeply, exhale slowly, and walk into an ancient home at dusk. As soon as the sky started turning gold or purple, markets closed, tools were put away, animals were brought inside or tied nearby, fires were prepared, doors were latched, voices softened. Even in busy cities like Rome, Athens, Thebes, or Chang'an, even in massive villages or small mountain towns, you could feel the day exhale. Work loosened its grip, people stretched their backs, and households shifted toward the night. No schedules, no alarms, just the sky's color gently instructing people, it's time to slow down. So the main fire, the hearth, brazier, or cooking pit, became the gathering place. Its light was warm, flickering, soft, imperfect, comforting. Households sat near it at night, not because it was cozy, but because it was the only place where you could actually see. You might see children leaning against parents, elders warming their hands, dogs curled near the coals, someone half asleep already, shadows dancing on walls. The fire turned ordinary evenings into gentle, quiet rituals. Keeping the fire alive through the night was essential. People carefully added small logs, adjusted coals, fixed smoke vents, banked the embers, shielded the flame from drafts. Not too big, that was dangerous. Not too small, that meant waking up cold. This wasn't drama, it was just steady, practical care. A simple, ancient version of turning down the thermostat before bed. Dinner wasn't the big meal of the day. For most ancient cultures, evening food was small, quick, and calming. Think soft bread, porridge, leftover stew, vegetables, watered wine, warm milk, fresh herbs, fruit when available. Nothing heavy, nothing fancy, just things that settled the stomach before sleep. It's almost like ancient people invented the idea of don't eat too much before bed without ever writing it down. Most civilizations practiced small cleansing rituals at dusk. Not full baths, those were rare, just gentle washing. Hands, face, feet, sometimes arms, cold water, usually, which woke you up for a moment, but somehow made sleep easier later.
After working all day in dust, heat, sweat, fields, or city streets, this tiny washing felt like wiping off the day itself. Oil lamps and candles weren't cheap, so households used them only when needed, only in specific corners, only for short tasks. Lamplight had a soft golden glow, dim enough to calm the eyes, but bright enough to finish weaving, writing, mending, or praying. Imagine sitting in a quiet room with just one tiny flame, barely pushing back the darkness. That gentle, flickering light was the ancient world's bedtime ambiance. Even peaceful villages took nighttime seriously. People bolted doors, lowered wooden bars, placed stones against gates, covered windows with cloth or shutters, brought in tools and animals inside. Not because of constant danger, but because the night was unknown. Closing up the house created a small bubble of safety, a glowing little island in the sea of darkness. Ancient people didn't fall into bed quickly. They prepared it like a small ritual. They shook out straw, smoothed mats, adjusted blankets, fluffed furs, arranged pillows, if they had them, stacked cushions under sore backs, tucked children beside siblings. Not fancy, not luxurious, just simple, quiet routines that made the body ready to rest. Families often slept close together for warmth, for safety, and for comfort. And when the room went quiet, it felt like everything around you exhaled. Nighttime conversations were different. No arguing, no loud debates, no planning complicated things, just soft, slow bedtime talk, recapping the day, sharing memories, telling small stories, humming lullabies, or simply sitting together in peaceful silence. Ancient life could be chaotic, but evenings were calm, a shared moment of collective unwinding before sleep wrapped itself around the household. Once the lamps were out and the fire dimmed to embers, the home surrendered to darkness. Not scary darkness, just natural, quiet, inevitable night. A darkness that made people talk less, move slowly, breathe deeper, settle down, let their minds soften. Night wasn't something to fight, it was something to join. The world shrunk to the size of a room, a bed, a blanket, a breath. And sleep came like a familiar friend.
All right, let's drift back into the ancient Near East. Because nothing says sleepy bedtime vibes quite like a civilization that spent half its time trying not to offend a small army of gods who were allegedly always listening. So, settle in, adjust your blanket, maybe sip some water. Because tonight, we're floating deeper into the quiet, slightly damp, nighttime world of Mesopotamia, where dreams were diagnostic tools, demons were blamed for snoring, and bedtime involved more superstition than a modern astrology app. Let's glide in. So, you might imagine royal chambers with draped fabrics, polished wood, and soft lighting. But Mesopotamian bedrooms were basically rooms. Just rooms. 4 walls, a bed, a lamp, sometimes a mat, maybe a goat walking by outside. The wealthy had proper beds, of course. Wooden frames, woven cords, sometimes topped with wool or reed mats. Basically the IKEA birch minimalist sleep platform, except it weighed 70 kilos
and came with a risk of termite infestations. But the average citizen? They slept on the roof half the year because it was cooler, and also because their house interior was approximately the temperature of a boiling stew pot. Roof sleeping was actually a whole cultural vibe. Families dragged bedding up the stairs at dusk, spread out blankets, and enjoyed a breeze that didn't smell like oven bricks. You get a sky full of stars, the occasional priest chanting in the distance, and also the risk of accidentally rolling off the edge if you tossed in your sleep. But hey, fresh air. Now, because Mesopotamians had a complicated relationship with their gods, translation, they constantly assumed they were one sneeze away from being smote, bedtime was filled with rituals. Not dramatic, not thrilling, just quietly anxious. Before sleeping, some people recited, "Oh my God, be calm with me," which honestly is the same energy as, "Please don't let my emails blow up overnight." Others touched religious amulets, whispered protective prayers, or placed figurines near the bed, tiny clay guardians who looked suspiciously like stressed-out little gremlins. These weren't decorative. They were insurance policies against night demons. Because, yes, they believed in sleep demons. Specifically, Lamashtu, a female demon blamed for sickness, nightmares, crib death, and bad vibes in general. Imagine trying to sleep while thinking, did I lock my door? Did I pay my taxes? Is that Lamashtu breathing near my ear? So bedtime was less cozy, winding down, and more gentle existential crisis with cotton blankets. Now, this is where things get delightfully messy. Mesopotamians believed dreams were direct messages from the gods. Every dream meant something. No exceptions. Even if the dream was, "You're eating an enormous onion. The onion is staring at you. The onion then becomes your cousin." There was a meaning. And there were literal books, big clay tablet books, that told you what each dream meant. For example, dream. You see yourself drinking warm beer, meaning you will soon receive good news. Honestly, respect. Even their dream omens understood the importance of a nice beverage. Another. Dream. Your teeth fall out, meaning someone is speaking ill of you. Which is hilarious because this is basically still TikTok dream symbolism. We haven't evolved at all. Humans just made the concept prettier. Now, if your dreams were too weird, too vivid, or too obviously screaming, therapy would help, Mesopotamia had sleep temples. These were early spiritual health centers where a priest tucked you in, you slept in a sacred chamber, you hoped one of the gods dropped by with a message, then a priest decoded it for you in the morning. Imagine going to a hotel where checkout includes, "Good morning. Based on your dream about wrestling a flaming duck, Marduk suggests you apologize to your mother." Priests took this seriously. They wrote down dreams, reviewed symbolism, and offered remedies, spiritual and medicinal. It was part religion, part psychology, part extremely early neurology, and part, "Please let this help because the world around me is full of unpredictable weather and my crops keep dying." Mesopotamia basically invented astrology, so naturally, they applied it to bedtime. Certain constellations influenced the best time to sleep, whether dreams would be clear, whether demons were more active, whether your pillow should be facing north, south, or whichever direction the priest said that week. Some tablets actually say things like, "If the moon is hidden, sleep lightly," which is early ancient advice for something about tonight feels sketchy, keep an ear open. Meanwhile, if Jupiter is bright, sleep without fear. Ah, yes, Jupiter, the ancient nightlight. Very comforting, very on brand. Now, snoring. In Mesopotamia, snoring was not seen as a cute human quirk. It was often interpreted as demons sitting on your chest, evil winds entering your lungs, or a sign of internal imbalance, which is honestly just ancient medical jargon for, I don't know, man, maybe you're tired. Some tablets even describe remedies involving herbs, smoke, and chanting to chase the noisy darkness, which is probably just the ancient equivalent of someone poking you in the ribs at 3 a.m. saying, "You're doing it again. Stop." People couldn't sleep back then either. Insomnia was a known issue, documented with the same weary despair we express today. Descriptions include eyes open like a hunted sheep, restless wandering of the mind, heart troubled by unseen forces, which is poetic shorthand for I can't sleep and I hate everything. To fix it, healers used warm milk, yes, even then, poppy mixtures, ancient sedatives, aromatic oils and perfumes, gentle chanting. Honestly, the Mesopotamian bedtime routine sounds like a luxury spa at this point. So, yes, kings had sleep issues too, because nothing keeps you awake like running a massive empire, managing droughts, dealing with rebellions, and reading omens that say things like, the eclipse means you're probably doomed. Insomnia is practically a job requirement. Kings employed court dream interpreters, priests, physicians, and sometimes just people to sit with them at night, not because they wanted comfort, but because the presence of others was thought to keep demons away. Basically, ancient kings invented the concept of sleep anxiety with entourage support. Now that we've wandered through the dusty, ritual-heavy, dream-obsessed world of Mesopotamian nights, let's slowly float onward. Because the ancient world is full of bedtime stories. Some weird, some deeply poetic, some deeply unnecessary, but all strangely human. And up next, we drift toward ancient Israel and the Hebrew world, where sleep became moral, spiritual, symbolic, and occasionally a poetic complaint against life.
All right, let's drift softly away from Mesopotamia's demon-haunted rooftops and shuffle westward. Not fast, no rushing. We're not catching a train. Just a slow glide into the quieter, more introspective nighttime world of ancient Israel. Because if Mesopotamia treated dreams like a customer service hotline to the gods, the Hebrew tradition treated sleep like a spiritual barometer, part poetry, part theology, and part, I really hope nothing weird happens tonight. So let's ease down, dim the mental lights, and slip into the desert evening. In the Hebrew world, sleep wasn't just a biological need, it was a divine gift, a form of mercy, a sign that God wasn't currently punishing you. If you slept well, it meant life was going okay. If you slept terribly, it was probably your fault somehow, or at least part of a larger divine lesson plan. There's this one line essentially saying, God grants sleep to those he loves, which is the poetic equivalent of, if you're up at 3 a.m. again, maybe rethink your life choices. Ancient scriptures are full of people describing sleepless nights due to worry, guilt, anxiety, and occasionally just general existential dread, which basically means insomnia is older than iron tools.
In their worldview, nighttime wasn't cozy, it wasn't peaceful, it was uncertain, shadowy, and spiritually charged. People feared the night because wild animals roamed, thieves preferred the dark, the desert got cold, and psychologically, darkness has always been the world's original horror genre. But since this is a sleep video, we're not leaning into the scary parts, just the cultural understanding that nighttime was not the moment to feel brave. Yet, interestingly, there was also a sense of trust. I lie down and sleep. I wake again because the Lord sustains me. Which is basically, I hope I wake up tomorrow, but no pressure. Unlike Mesopotamians who had literal manuals explaining dreams like IKEA instructions, ancient Israelite culture didn't treat dreams like fortune cookies. They were rare, serious, not to be interpreted casually. If you dreamed something weird, you didn't run to the village dream guy. You waited. You prayed. Maybe you silently panicked. But you didn't assume every dream about cows meant a prophecy. When dreams did come with meaning, they were usually unmistakable, narrated like a short film, and directly involving angelic messengers. This wasn't vague symbolism. This was the ancient world's version of receiving an email with the subject line, "Important, do not ignore." Unlike Egyptian pillows shaped like wooden torture devices or Mesopotamian rooftop mattresses, the Hebrew sleeping environment was remarkably simple. Most people slept on mats of wool or woven reeds, blankets of animal skins, sometimes elevated platforms, sometimes just the ground. And since the climate was warm, people often slept outdoors during harvest seasons. The bedding wasn't fancy, but it was functional. If you were wealthy, maybe you had a carved bed frame, linen sheets, cushions stuffed with wool, but nothing too elaborate. This was a culture that prized humility and simplicity, even in sleep. So, one fun detail, ancient Israelite households didn't have the modern, everyone gets their own room system. Families often slept in shared spaces. Too many people, not enough square footage, and honestly, no one thought privacy was necessary. It wasn't weird, it wasn't scandalous, it was just how life worked. You, your siblings, your cousins, and possibly a goat were all living your best communal sleeping experience. This, by the way, also meant people whispered before bed, people prayed out loud, someone definitely snored, and someone always hogged the blanket. Humanity truly has not changed. Because nighttime was dangerous, houses sometimes had rotating night watches. Not official ones, not militaristic, just the family member who got stuck with the stay awake and listen for weird noises duty. Imagine lying down peacefully while your brother sits upright in the corner, trying not to doze off, armed with a stick, listening for anything out of place. Very secure, very awkward. And if you were a shepherd, your entire job was basically one long night watch. You slept lightly, or not at all, while the sheep did whatever sheep do, which is mostly grazing, wandering, and inventing new ways to stress out their caretakers. There's also this poetic overlap between sleep and death in Hebrew writing. Not frightening, just symbolic. Sleep was often described as a temporary, gentle state, a kind of waiting, which for our purposes is very on brand. We're not here to excite anyone, just to drift. So ancient writers used phrases like, he slept with his ancestors, he lay down and did not rise again. Calm, soft, a little sad, but overwhelmingly peaceful. Sleep was a metaphor for vulnerability, for renewal, for trust, and sometimes for giving up control entirely. If you've ever listened to a calming nighttime affirmation playlist, you've basically experienced the vibe of ancient Hebrew poetry.
Many psalms are essentially ancient sleep aid scripts. I lie down in peace. I will not fear the night. My soul rests in quiet. Some verses literally describe calming oneself mentally before bed, which is impressively relatable. These are the earliest known examples of, "Okay, brain, please relax now." There were dream interpreters, but they weren't common, they weren't professionalized, and they didn't write 800-page clay books about cow symbolism. Interpretation was spiritual, not transactional. If someone had a big dream, a profound dream, they might seek a prophet, but only if it really felt meaningful. Imagine someone today saying, "I had a weird dream. I better go ask a holy man." It wasn't casual, it wasn't entertainment, it was serious business. As we drift through this world of simple mats, shared sleeping spaces, poetry-induced calm, and dreams treated like rare treasures, we start to see how different ancient cultures shaped the meanings of night. Mesopotamia turned it into a spiritual battlefield. Egypt treated it like an organized VIP lounge for souls. The Hebrew world saw it as a moral and emotional mirror. Each culture gave the night a personality.
Let's glide eastward now, past the Jordan valleys, past the dry hills, past the wandering traders and their eternally complaining donkeys, into the broad, echoing landscapes of ancient Persia. This is the land of long shadows, fragrant gardens, fire temples glowing in the dusk, and kings who built palaces so big that the cleaning staff probably needed a map just to find the nearest broom. So take a breath, sink a little deeper into your pillow, because tonight we drift into the world of the Achaemenids, the Persians who gave us empires, postal systems, and the world's most elegant way of falling asleep surrounded by armed guards. Persian elites slept in style. Comfort was a full-time commitment. Rooms weren't cluttered. Furniture was minimal. But textiles? Oh, they went hard on textiles. Royal and aristocratic bedding involved thick, soft mattresses, layered quilts, embroidered blankets, cedar-scented storage chests, and pillows stuffed with wool, down, or whatever felt expensive. Persians loved comfort. Comfort was political. Comfort meant I am powerful enough to have a good night's sleep. Meanwhile, the average farmer, they slept on a mat, near the hearth, on the floor, next to at least one family member and possibly a goat. So the usual ancient world bedtime arrangement. Persian kings never slept alone. Not emotionally, not spiritually, not physically. Their bedrooms had guards stationed at each entrance, attendants waiting quietly along the walls, a scribe or two lurking in case the king had a late-night thought, and sometimes a food taster nearby because paranoia is more ancient than dirt. You might imagine this created a restful environment, but actually it's hard to sleep with 12 people standing in absolute silence, pretending not to breathe. Still, this was part of royal life. The king's body was state property. If he sneezed, someone probably wrote it down. So sleep had to be monitored, guarded, and documented, like some kind of ancient Fitbit with human staff. Persian spirituality leaned heavily on purity, physical and cosmic. Fire was sacred. Fire was the symbol of divine truth. Fire was kept clean and tended by priests who definitely did not take naps on the job.
But ordinary people incorporated fire into their nighttime routines too. A small lamp might burn while they slept, representing clarity, safety, divine protection, and the comforting idea that the universe wasn't just chaos with a moon. But here's the fun part. Zoroastrian texts discouraged blowing out flames by mouth. That was considered contaminating. So imagine going to bed thinking, did I extinguish the fire correctly? Or did I just spiritually pollute the living room? Very relaxing. The ancient world loved a good night demon. Persia was no exception. Zoroastrian cosmology viewed the universe as an ongoing tug-of-war between good and evil. And nighttime? Definitely evil's preferred shift. Some texts mention malevolent spirits that prowled in darkness, especially around sleeping humans who weren't properly protected by ritual purity. So people used prayers, charms, recitations from the Avesta, and clean spaces. Purity mattered a lot. Not in a panicked way, just a matter-of-fact ancient attitude like, better keep the room tidy so demons don't think I'm an easy target, which is honestly the world's earliest motivational cleaning technique. Persia didn't have the dream industrial complex of Mesopotamia, but it took dreams seriously, especially kings. If a king had a vivid dream, the court jumped into action. Priests and wise men interpreted symbolism, but always through a religious and moral lens, not superstition. Some dreams were considered warnings. Some were considered divine nudges. And some were politically inconvenient, especially if they predicted that someone else was destined to rule. Nothing ruins a good night's sleep like a prophetic dream that says you're about to be replaced. Persian kings, like all ancient rulers with too much land and too many responsibilities, were famously terrible sleepers. The sources don't say this outright, but you can read between the lines. Constant political intrigue, assassinations left and right, endless wars in every direction, family members with suspicious ambitions, the general stress of running the world's largest empire. You don't exactly tuck yourself in peacefully after a day like that, which is probably why royal physicians were constantly nearby, armed with herbal mixtures, scented oils, and early sedatives. Imagine being the doctor who had to calm down a king who could execute you for prescribing the wrong tea blend. Very soothing. This is a fun little side note. Persian texts occasionally mention favored sleeping postures for proper health. Sleeping on the left side was discouraged because it was believed to hinder digestion. Sleeping on the right side was preferred. It helped the stomach settle. Sleeping on the back associated with laziness or vulnerability. And sleeping on your stomach? Not even an option. That was considered undignified and spiritually destabilizing. So next time you flop onto your stomach like a tired walrus, know that ancient Persians would have had opinions about it. Because ritual purity mattered, nighttime routines involved washing hands, rinsing the mouth, sometimes washing the face, avoiding contact with polluted materials, and making sure bedding stayed clean. This wasn't luxury. This was spiritual responsibility. It also made Persian households smell nicer than most ancient homes, which is a delightful bonus. Here's something unexpectedly relatable. Some Persian writings describe nighttime as a time of reflection. Not in a frantic, spiraling 2 a.m., why did I say that thing in 2014 sort of way. Just calm, quiet evaluation of life, goals, and morality. Persian elites journaled or dictated thoughts to scribes because literacy was optional if you were rich enough. Ordinary people sat quietly, sometimes outdoors, watching firelight or stars, letting setups simmer gently. There's a serenity to it. The idea that nighttime is slow, soft, unhurried. A pause in the day for thinking without urgency. Very on brand for a sleep monologue. And so, after wandering through firelit bedrooms, royal insomnia, purity rituals, comfortable mattresses, cosmic symbolism, and demons who disliked messy rooms, we drift out of ancient Persia and into another landscape entirely. Up next, we gently glide toward ancient India, where sleep was spiritual, philosophical, medical, and sometimes described in poetry so soothing, it makes modern sleep apps look like amateurs. No rush.
Let's drift further east now. Across mountains, through monsoon winds, over river plains where the air tastes like humidity and jasmine. We soften our steps as we float into ancient India, one of the few civilizations that actually sat down, thought about sleep, and said, yes, let's philosophize this. Because while other cultures treated sleep like a biological inconvenience or a spiritual battlefield, ancient India turned it into a medical science, a moral question, a spiritual symbol, and a category in philosophical debates that probably lasted longer than most people's REM cycles. So settle in. Let your shoulders drop a little. We're entering the land of Ayurveda, early yoga theory, and poets who could describe a quiet night so beautifully that half the audience probably fell asleep on the spot. Ayurveda, ancient India's medical system, didn't just mention sleep casually. It treated sleep like one of the 3 pillars of life, alongside food and controlled reasonable behavior, which, judging from the human species, we've been ignoring ever since. Sleep wasn't optional. Sleep wasn't weakness. Sleep was literally described as that which brings nourishment to all living beings. Imagine a medical system where sleep is considered a sacred, life-sustaining gift instead of a badge of laziness. Truly revolutionary. Ayurvedic texts go into detail, calm, thoughtful detail, about proper bedtime, ideal sleeping positions, unhealthy sleep hours, and even the recommended number of naps. Spoiler, not too many, but also not 0. Basically the opposite of hustle culture. This is probably the only ancient civilization where a doctor would gently scold you for staying up late doom scrolling, if phones had existed. Ayurveda categorizes people into 3 basic types. Doshas. And yes, each one sleeps differently. Vata types. Light sleepers. Prone to restlessness. Probably the kind of people who wake up when a mosquito flaps its wings in the next village. Pitta types. Moderate sleepers. Headstrong. Likely to wake up because they're already thinking about tomorrow's to-do list. Kapha types. Champion sleepers. The ancient world's deep sleep Olympians, capable of napping through thunderstorms, festivals, and probably mild political uprisings. Ayurvedic advice wasn't just medical, it was gentle and practical. If you slept too much, you cooled your body energy too far. If you slept too little, your mind overheated. Basically, don't be a sleep hero and don't be a sleep disaster. Just balance. Very on brand for India. Unlike Egypt's dramatic amulets or Mesopotamia's demon prevention strategies,
Indian sleep routines were refreshingly peaceful. Common recommendations included oiling the feet before bed, rubbing fragrant oils into the scalp, light stretching, soft lamps, warm milk with herbs, quiet conversation, and a mind gently unwinding at its own pace. It's essentially the world's earliest evening wellness routine, but without the influencers selling subscriptions. And yes, the famous sesame oil foot massage is not a modern invention. It goes way back. Ancient India was doing bedtime self-care before the word self-care even existed. Ayurvedic texts calmly explain how you should sleep. Right side, recommended. Left side, sometimes okay. On your belly, definitely discouraged. On your back, allowed, but considered spiritually vulnerable. And if you slept in weird, contorted positions, that was a sign of mental imbalance, or simply that you owned a bad mattress. Probably both. Now we drift gently into philosophy, slowly, without letting anything get too exciting. In early Hindu thought, sleep was conceptualized as a temporary dissolution of the self. Not frightening, not tragic, just a quiet dissolving back into something pure. The Upanishads, early philosophical texts, described 3 states of being: waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. And deep sleep was considered the most peaceful because the mind wasn't trapped in sensory chaos or chasing dream narratives. The soul wasn't gone, just resting, floating, quiet. It's a very serene view, honestly, almost meditative. Dreams in ancient Indian texts were divided into meaningful, meaningless, and the "your stomach was too full, please calm down" category. Dream interpretation was done, but gently, not like Mesopotamia's symbolic encyclopedias. Dreams could be warnings, reflections, illusions, or messages from the subtle body. But people weren't told to obsess over them. The advice was basically, if it's important, you'll know. If not, please go about your day. Refreshing. Now we drift softly into early Buddhist thought, where monks lived simple lives and tried very hard not to nap excessively, even though the temptation was probably strong. Buddhism didn't demonize sleep. It just, encouraged moderation. Too much sleep was considered a form of dullness. Too little sleep disturbed meditation. So Buddhist texts recommended going to bed early, waking before sunrise, sleeping on simple bedding, and keeping the mind calm, not wandering into fantasies. Monks often slept on straw mats, wooden platforms, or thin bedding. No feather-stuffed luxury mattresses here. Simplicity was the whole point. But even monks acknowledged the sleepy hindrance, the universal human desire to just lie down and do nothing. So yes, even in the ancient world, people struggled to stay awake during spiritual lectures. We are all the same. Ancient Indian poets could write about the nighttime like it was a sacred painting. Soft wind, moonlight, flower scents, lonely birds calling, lovers separated, the world winding down. If you ever need a natural sleep aid, just pick up some Sanskrit poetry. There's always some gentle line like, "The nightly softly across the earth, like a shawl placed on a sleeping child." And just like that, your brain starts yawning. Even the epic Mahabharata has sections describing entire nights passing in quiet reflection, characters sitting silently, thinking in the dark, listening to insects. No plot, no battles, just calm nighttime vibes. Very sleep video friendly. Most ancient Indian families slept communally. Houses were small, extended families were big, and privacy was a mythical creature. People slept on mats, on raised platforms, on the floor, or outdoors on hot nights. Children slept beside parents, siblings slept beside siblings, elders slept near the fire, and someone's uncle probably snored loud enough to scare the neighbor's cows. There's something deeply human about it. Everyone sharing the same sounds, same air, same night. So after wandering through Ayurvedic bedtime wisdom, philosophical sleep states, monks resisting naps, fragrant lamps, and poetry so soothing it could tranquilize an elephant, we drift onward. Our next stop is ancient China, where sleep was governed by cosmic balance, qi flow, yin and yang, and bedrooms arranged according to metaphysical interior design rules. But we drift there softly, gently.
All right, welcome back, sleepy traveler. At this point, we've drifted through Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece, and a fair share of existential nighttime crises. Tonight, or rather in this part, we sink into something the Babylonians took incredibly seriously: dreams. The ancient equivalent of scrolling TikTok at midnight, except theirs came with divine warnings and absolutely zero sense of humor. So, get comfortable. Take a slow breath. Because we're floating back into Bronze Age bedrooms where the mattress is straw, the window is a hole in the wall, and the night sky is filled with every god imaginable watching you sleep like helicopter parents. Let's head in gently. If there was one thing the Babylonians loved more than taxes, and trust me, they loved taxes, it was interpreting dreams. They had an entire genre of literature called dream omens because apparently insomnia wasn't stressful enough. Worrying that your dream about a goat wearing sandals means your cousin will betray you next month. And these weren't short pamphlets either. Babylonian scribes wrote massive clay tablets filled with line after line of dream scenarios. Basically, if you dream X, then Y will happen. They created a sort of cosmic cause and effect chart, except no one consulted any peer-reviewed journals. Some examples feel almost painfully specific, like someone was definitely working through personal issues. Like, if a man dreams he is falling from a roof, misfortune will come. Well, yes. That's also what happens if you fall off a roof in real life. Very perceptive. If he dreams he eats lion meat, he will gain strength. Which sounds cool until you remember that lions were rare, and eating one was not a casual Tuesday activity. If he dreams his teeth fall out, someone in the household will die. A classic. Humans have been having dental anxiety nightmares for thousands of years, and apparently the Babylonians decided to make them even worse. You can almost hear the scribe muttering, "Teeth again. People keep dreaming about teeth. Let's just say it's about death and call it a day." Imagine you're a Babylonian farmer. You spend the day in the field, sweating in the sun, worrying about floods, droughts, and the neighbor stealing your best goat. By the time night arrives, you'd like something simple and peaceful. Maybe 8 hours of unconsciousness. But no. You're sleeping in a world where the moon god Sin is watching you. The storm god Adad might send you messages. The goddess Ishtar could appear in a dream and ruin your life on a whim, as she often did. So, when you eventually fall asleep on your slightly lumpy mat, the Babylonians believed that any image, noise, or feeling in your dream was a divine communique, even the boring stuff. Picture it. You dream, you accidentally step in a puddle. Boom. Someone in the temple writes down, if a man steps in water in a dream, it means his path is unclear. It's not exactly Freud, but the effort is admirable.
Babylon had professionals for this. Imagine therapists, but instead of asking how you feel, they ask whether the goat in your dream was facing north or south because that apparently changes everything. These dream interpreters belong to elite scribal families trained for generations. Their tablet collections were huge, libraries of baked clay. Sleep knowledge you could drop on your foot and break a toe. If you dream something concerning, let's say you dreamed your house collapsed, which is frankly a nightmare I'd rather not contemplate in a society where their homes were made of unbaked mud brick, you'd go see one of these experts. They'd consult their tablets, maybe hum something dramatically and say, "Ah, house collapse. This means change is coming, possibly financial," which is the ancient version of astrology. The Babylonians divided dreams into good dreams, sent by the gods, bad dreams, sent by demons, obviously, confusing dreams, sent by your exhausted brain trying to process trauma, though they wouldn't call it that. And they were absolutely sure dreams came from outside the mind, not from inside. There was no concept of the subconscious, no, your brain is cleaning itself while you sleep. Just gods handing out cryptic messages like divine post-it notes. Sometimes people needed specific answers, usually for health problems, curses, or personal crises. So they went to sleep in temples. This practice, called dream incubation, was like booking an appointment with the divine customer service department. You'd perform rituals, cleanse yourself with water, offer incense, maybe sacrifice a goat if you were feeling fancy, and then you'd lie down on a special mat inside the temple. The idea was simple. Sleep near the gods, get answers in your dreams, and hope they weren't in a bad mood. The divine bedside manner was inconsistent at best. While their dreams were wild, their actual sleeping arrangements were pretty humble. People slept on reed mats, straw mattresses, wooden bed frames if they were wealthy, and sometimes the roof during hot months. The rooftop sleep tradition is delightful. It shows up across Mesopotamia and the Mediterranean, but Babylonians were especially into it. Picture it. Warm night, stars scattered above the flat mud brick city, a cool breeze drifting across the city walls, occasional donkey noises because ancient cities were always loud. It was peaceful. Unless you were afraid of nightmares, in which case you slept inside because demons were supposedly more active outdoors. Comforting.
We sometimes imagine ancient people going to bed whenever it got dark, but Babylonians actually had a night flow. Dinner. Usually bread, beer, lots of beer, some onions, and maybe dried fish if you were lucky. Evening chores, like spinning wool, mending clothes, or sweeping the home courtyard. Religious recitations, short prayers to ward off evil spirits. Because Babylonian demons loved to haunt people at night, and if your prayer performance wasn't up to standard, well, better luck tomorrow. Occasional night business. Merchants sometimes held late meetings to avoid heat. Not very romantic, but practical. Finally, sleep. Hopefully uninterrupted by visions of lions, floods, or your mother-in-law, which would all immediately be classified as omens. The Babylonians believed nightmares could literally make you sick. If you dreamed something terrifying, say being chased by a demon with a bird head, a surprisingly common motif, you might wake up shaking, sweating, or nauseous. Modern science? That's anxiety. Babylonians? Demon attack. And they had treatments too. Amulets, herbal remedies, incantations involving a lot of dramatic chanting,
placing certain stones under your pillow, or sleeping with a figurine of a protective god, which is basically the ancient version of a weighted anxiety plushie. My personal favorite remedy is one involving a reed clay figurine that you whisper your fears into and then dissolve. It's both poetic and extremely messy. Because you know kings and queens had the most luxurious, melodramatic sleep routines of all. Babylonian royalty, especially in the Neo-Babylonian period, slept in rooms filled with cedarwood furniture, embroidered cushions, bronze or wooden bed frames, linen curtains, and sometimes depictions of winged protective spirits overhead, just in case a demon tried sneaking in. But even palace sleepers weren't immune to ominous dreams. There is a chilling but calmly described set of letters between astrologers and King Esarhaddon, where the king keeps sending messages like, "I dreamed something weird. Interpret it and tell me whether I'm going to die." And the astrologers basically reply, "Sire, everything is fine." Very symbolic, positive energy only. Because you cannot tell a king his dream predicts doom. You simply do not do that unless you want to become part of an unpleasant execution method. This man had a talent for receiving messages in dreams, or at least for telling everyone he did. He once dreamed that a god handed him a divine measuring rod and instructed him to build a huge temple. And he did. Took the dream very literally. Probably the ancient equivalent of waking up one morning and saying, "I dreamed of IKEA furniture. The gods clearly want me to redecorate the entire city." The inscriptions describing his dream are elaborate, detailed, symbolic, full of imagery that must have taken ages for scribes to carve out on stone. The entire project is a reminder that in Mesopotamia, dreams weren't personal. They were political statements. If you were powerful, dreams became tools, heavenly endorsements, royal publicity. Imagine modern politicians claiming, "I dreamed last night that the universe wants me to build a stadium." The Babylonians would applaud. We need to talk about Lamashtu, the terrifying demoness who ruined everyone's sleep. She was believed to attack mothers and infants at night, which made her the ancient equivalent of every new parent's worst fear. People placed amulets around cradles, including depictions of Pazuzu, another demon, but a friendly one, if you can believe it. Yes, they protected babies by using one demon to scare away another demon. Peak Mesopotamian logic. Lamashtu was also blamed for nightmares, fevers, and illness. If you woke up gasping from a bad dream, people might assume she'd been lurking nearby. No wonder the Babylonians created so many bedtime rituals. They probably passed out from exhaustion long before sleep hygiene was even a concept. For all their fears, the Babylonians treated sleep with awe. It was a time for divine messages, a moment of healing, a chance for the body to restore itself, a window where gods and humans met. They didn't fear sleep itself, just what might come with it. And that's oddly relatable. Even today, we check our phones, worry about the next day, think about our mistakes from 10 years ago, and then finally collapse into unconsciousness, hoping our brain won't serve us something strange. Babylonians just added more mythology. Before we leave Babylon, imagine yourself lying on a reed mat, listening to the distant murmur of the Euphrates River. A clay lamp flickers on the wall. The air smells faintly of clay and oil.
someone nearby is chanting a prayer. A dog barks far off. A warm breeze moves through the open doorway, and above you the stars gleam, the same stars the god Sin used to guide the night. It's peaceful in its own dusty way. Now that we've floated through their strange nighttime logic, we can gently move on to the next ancient culture on our long, sleepy journey. In the next part, we'll drift into the nighttime world of ancient India, where sages wrote long hymns about sleep, and where dreams were a woven part of philosophy and metaphysics, rather than just divine weather forecasts. But for now, just settle into the quiet.